The following is a production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
Call to order the February 3rd quasi-judicial meeting of the Cary Town Council, and I would ask that you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item is item 1.2, adoption of our agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Our first quasi-judicial public hearing is for All Stars Children's Academy. An overview of the hearing procedures and detailed rules are attached to the printed agenda. All speakers who want to speak during this public hearing must be administered an oath by Mrs. Johnson, who is to my right. We'll pause just a moment to allow those individuals who would like to speak at this public hearing to approach Mrs. Johnson and receive their oaths. And I'm going to pause from saying anything or doing anything until that has been completed. I'll now ask any council member if they've had any site visits, ex parte communication, financial relationship, special knowledge, or close relationship to an affected person to disclose, starting on my left with Mr. Yerha.
No, sir, I have not.
Mr. France?
No.
I have not.
I have not.
I have not.
All righty. Based on the disclosures that you've heard from council members, I'd invite anyone to the podium that has been sworn in to speak if you have an objection to a council member's participation in this hearing. Seeing no one, I'll open the quasi-judicial public hearing and recognize Mr. Hales of our staff who will introduce this item. Mr. Hales.
Thank you, Council. As you've indicated, the first item on tonight's agenda is a hearing on behalf of Alston Properties, LLC for modification to an approved daycare, which is currently under construction, actually, at the corner at 7240 O'Kelly Chapel Road. That property is located at the intersection of Alston Avenue with O'Kelly Chapel Road in the Alston Regional Activity Center. It's actually on the very edge of the Alston Activity Center. There's a detached single-family residence to the north, Tradition at Stonewater / Amberton at Stonewater. Apartments are located to the east, to the west and northwest. There is vacant property located to the east, and O'Kelly Chapel Road forms the southern boundary. That road is designated on the Comprehensive Transportation Plan as a 6-lane median divided thoroughfare. There are currently no transit services in the area. The closest one would be a fixed TTA route along NC 55, and there's a future C-Tran route proposed along Green Level Church Road to the west. Existing conditions, like I said before, it's already under construction. We don't have a good aerial photo. The site plan 13 SPO 35 was approved by the town in December of 2013 administratively. That plan was for a 16,000 square foot daycare, which is the larger building located toward the intersection, and an additional 12,000 square foot of office located toward the rear of the property. To give you an idea what that looks like, this is a shot from the intersection of Alston and O'Kelly Chapel Road looking east toward Parkside Town Commons. The daycare building is shown there on the downhill side of the property. You see a little bit of the widening that was done on O'Kelly Chapel Road. And then the office pad would be in the rear of the building, and the playground is currently under construction, the playground area for the daycare. So as part of that original plan approval in December of 2013, the applicant was required to show a reclaimed water line, approximately 459 feet of 12-inch reclaimed water line along the southern property frontage. They chose during the plan approval process to put that on the southern side of O'Kelly Chapel Road, and that's shown in the approximate location of the yellow dashed line on this plan. The applicant is before you tonight requesting to modify that approved site plan to remove that reclaimed water line and to make no payment in lieu of construction of that water line. That concludes staff's presentation. We'll bring the applicant up at this time, and then staff will be back to provide their professional observations following the applicant's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hales. At this time, we'll call on the applicant's attorney to present arguments and evidence in support of the application by addressing the applicable approval criteria.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group here on behalf of the applicant. Here with me tonight is Mr. Bill Daniel, Bill Daniel and Associates. They're the engineers for this plan. And I don't quibble with the presentation that Kevin gave with respect to ultimately what the request is. And essentially what this request is, I mean, it's a request for approval of a site plan modification because that's what you all do in this capacity, but essentially it comes down to this reclaimed water line. And the reclaimed water line is, you could see on the slide that is in front of you right now, is reclaimed water line that is on property that is owned by third parties. And pursuant to the town's policy statement, and that's included in the staff's presentation and the materials, policy statement 132, developers of property in areas that are designated for reclaimed water lines, and this is one of them, are responsible for the full cost of reclaimed water facilities within their own properties. And this clearly is not on their own property. Now, as the staff reports, and I don't think anybody would dispute that it's not on their property, and so the real genesis of this request is they don't own it. They don't have the ability to deliver the line in question. As the staff report notes, that was a change that was made during the plan review process, that the line was located on the south side as part of their plan review process, and I will explain why that was done, and Bill Daniel, who was part of that process, is here to answer questions related to that. I'm going to pass around a copy of the approved site plan for Evans Farms Townhomes, and I will give a copy too. This is also a plan that I'm intimately familiar with. It was a plan that came before you all for quasi-judicial site plan approval. Included on this plan, and the section of the plan that you have is the utility plan, and I have highlighted thereon essentially two components of it. One is on the north side of O'Kelly Chapel Road. That is the water line that exists in O'Kelly Chapel Road. And on the south side in green is the reclaimed water line that's being built as part of development of that property. So as Evans Farms Townhomes is going forward, they are building and extending a reclaimed water line. And as you can see, it's extending north and east and stopping at Alston Avenue. And so the reason why the reclaimed water line is shown on, and just for you all's edification, let's see if I can, okay. This is the site where my client is working on as part of this project, and this is Alston Avenue, and Evans Farms Townhomes would be in this quadrant. So the northeasternmost quadrant of Evans Farms Townhomes is essentially this corner here. And that is where the water line as part of Evans Farms will terminate until it is picked back up on the other side of Alston property, or Alston Avenue. So the reason why the reclaimed water line is shown on the south side of O'Kelly Chapel Road is because that's where the reclaimed water line is. That's where the Evans Farms Townhomes is building it, and it will, at some point, I imagine, it will be extended across, under Alston Avenue and along the south side of O'Kelly Chapel Road as well. So again, it was a change that was made to the plans during the planning process, but the genesis for that change was reflecting the fact that MI was putting that reclaimed water line on the south side of O'Kelly Chapel Road. So from my client's perspective, that is the justification for not requiring this owner and this applicant to put that line in, is because they don't own it. And the reason why they don't own it is because it's planned to go across property owned by third parties. So with that, I will call Mr. Bill Daniel to testify as to the plan's compliance with the other requirements for approval of a site plan.
Good evening. My name is Bill Daniel with William G. Daniel and Associates, engineers for the project. And even though I know that the real focus here is on the water line, I understand that the process is essentially a reapproval of the site plan, and so the features associated with, or the features included in the site plan need to be addressed in the record. So I will, in a rather stilted fashion, if I may, address those items, and I'll address them very briefly. Just in general, you know, it is an approved site plan. It was reviewed by the town staff. There were revisions through the process, and it was approved. It's basically constructed, but there are features that I'd like to call to your attention that just reinforce the fact that it meets the town's requirements. The plan complies with all applicable requirements of the ordinance, including the development design standards of Chapter 7 and 8, as well as the dedication improvements provisions of Chapter 8, as well as the applicable town specifications. More specifically, the plan adequately protects the other properties in the area or residential uses located on the same property from the potential adverse impacts of the proposed development. This plan includes perimeter buffers. This plan includes building placement and landscaping to achieve the proper transitions to abutting uses. And it in itself is a low impact use. The architectural or the appearance of the building is even a low building. It fits very well in every way on the site, and we feel that it avoids any negative impact to abutting properties. The plan provides harmony and unity with the development of nearby properties. This is somewhat redundant. The landscaping, the architectural elements, as you saw, are a bit, if you saw the photo, they are residential in character, really. It's a sloped roof, gable treatment on each of the images, each of the views. And there is commercial in the area. It's a complementary use, and it is, we think, done in a manner to ensure that it is in harmony with the abutting land uses. and the development that is occurring and has occurred. The plan provides safe conditions for pedestrians and motorists and prevents a dangerous arrangement of pedestrians and vehicular ways. We have walks on site, walks adjacent to the site. We have 2 driveways that serve the site. We have those designed and located in such a way so as to avoid any dangerous situations or conflicts between the motoring public or the patrons of this facility and those who would be using it as pedestrians. Plans provide safe ingress and egress for emergency services to the site. We have 2 driveways to the site. Each of those are designed to accommodate the turning movements of emergency vehicles. There's considerable widening along O'Kelly Chapel Road, and we have the lane markings and the laneage delineation required to direct traffic into the site and out of the site safely. That has been worked out with town staff and with NCDOT. The plan provides mitigation for traffic congestion impacts reasonably expected to be generated by the project. This site, as Kevin mentioned, this is a 6-lane section. There will be a median, 3 lanes on either side. And because of the proximity of this site, or actually the location of this site in one of the quadrants of the intersection, it has constructed a much larger amount of improvements than a site of this acreage would normally be required to do. There were improvements made along Austin Avenue for the length of the property. There were significant improvements made along O'Kelly Chapel Road. As you can see from that photo before you, O'Kelly Chapel Road was a 2-lane road. Part of the obligations of this site plan are to construct the curb in its ultimate location. Start with a 2-lane roadway. That 2-lane roadway is essentially where the median will be ultimately. So what the developer has had to do in order to achieve that is to construct more than 3 lanes width of roadway and the tapers back into the 2-lane section. And we feel that the extent of improvements that were implemented in order to achieve that more than accommodates the traffic that'll be generated on the site and the congestion. I'll be glad to answer any questions that I may.
Mr. Mayor, we have no further witnesses at this time. Again, just want to close by indicating that Mr. Daniel's testimony supports the notion that this plan otherwise complies with the requirements for approval of a site plan. And as it relates to the waiver that we've requested, again, the town's policy statement with respect to extension of these type of facilities obligates the owners of property for facilities within their own properties. And again, I don't think it can be disputed that this off-site water line is in fact an off-site water line. And with that, we'll answer any questions you all have. Thank you.
Thank you. This time, I'll invite other speakers who have been sworn in who wish to speak in support of the application to approach the podium one at a time. Any other speakers in support? Seeing no one, will move on to cross-examination of the witnesses who testified in support. No cross-examination. We'll now open the hearing to those who are opposed to the request and ask you to approach the podium one at a time. Nope. Call on town staff for any testimony they wish to add.
All right, thank you. And as has been mentioned previously, this site plan has already been approved, so all the observations I would normally be offering from a planning perspective are not strictly applicable. So I will be introducing Mr. Jamie Bisonet, an engineer in the Water Resources Department, to speak to the town's observations about the reclaimed water line itself.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Good evening, council. I'm going to speak to where this requirement comes from a town perspective. The town has two reclaimed service areas, the north and the south, as shown on this slide. This site plan falls within the north area. Excuse me. And according to policy statement 132, the effective utilization of reclaimed water, any new site plan in this area must install reclaimed water line along its frontage to meet the town's master plan. And this is a clip, the second slide, from the town's master plan, which shows the location of the site. All Stars is located on Kelly Chapel Road, which the master plan calls for a 12-inch water line to be installed. This slide shows the vicinity of the site with the existing reclaimed water system. The two red circles here indicate the ends of the existing system as we know it today. This slide shows the improvement, which would be in the yellow line, and how it connects with the existing system. With the one large parcel to the east that could develop in the near future, if this line is not constructed, there would be a significant gap in the system, which would feed live reclaimed water all the way from Green Level Church Road down to Parkside Town Commons, the large commercial development down at 55. If this waiver is granted, the town would have to construct this line at an estimated cost of up to $60,000. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Hales.
And just to kind of summarize for council, there are two decisions before you tonight. The first being the request for the waiver to the reclaimed water line with no payment in lieu. And Mr. Bissonnette just covered a lot of the staff observations, so I'm not going to repeat them here. And then the second one would be an action on the site plan itself, which really the only difference between the new site plan and the old one is the elimination of the reclaimed water line. If you have any questions, we'll be available. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This time I'll invite...
I'm sorry, before you continue, I wanted to make one point in response to an argument of Mr. Barron about policy statement 132 and the fact that this water line is now not shown on his client's property. I think you all understood from the presentation, but I just wanted to clarify that in the original site plan approval process, it was required to be shown on his client's property, but they requested, at their request, that it be moved off their property and across the roadway. So I wanted to make sure that that wasn't lost on you all as you deliberate this, that it was their request of staff to show the line on the opposite side of the roadway, and now they're back asking to not construct the line.
Can you put back the last page that Mr. Hales had up there?
The modification summary or the area?
The summary, yes, that one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'll invite cross-examination of the town witnesses. Mr. Barron? Nope? Okay. If anyone's been sworn in, has objections to the competency of any testimony, I'd invite you forward. Does either party believe that new evidence has been presented tonight that warrants a continuance of the hearing? Okay, continuing, we'll now begin deliberative phase of the hearing. Do council members have questions or comments?
I have questions. I mean, one of the statements made is that the applicant feels like they have paid in more because they had to tie into a road that is center of the easement, you know, the road easement versus having the two lanes. My question is, why aren't we requiring the developers along that corridor to widen the road to its future corridor?
They are. It's an existing two-lane road today. It's proposed to be a 6-lane median divided facility, so they were required to widen 2 additional lanes outside the existing lane.
And are they doing that?
Correct. They are making road improvements consistent with the CTP.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So they're doing their road requirement, and if they're doing their road requirement, there's no extra cost then of tying in further to what they need to tie in.
Correct. And here's a better shot. I didn't include it earlier, but it shows the additional 2 lanes of widening with the new
Okay.
curb and gutter.
Okay. And when did they come in and ask you for this line to be moved to the other side of the street?
It was part of the original approval.
Okay.
It hadn't been changed since.
Okay. And would they have benefit from having that reclaimed pipe going past there? Is there benefit to that property?
I would defer to the applicant to see if they're tying into it. My understanding is they are not.
they're not choosing to tie into it, but they could tie into it?
Correct. If they were to request irrigation in the future, or
Uh-huh.
a future tenant or whatever would use irrigation, they'd be
Would
required to
benefit.
tie into the reclaimed water line.
Okay.
Because it's in the reclaimed service area, we don't issue potable meters for irrigation.
Okay, okay, that's important for me to know, okay.
Mr. France?
Is there, can you go back to the slide that showed the existing reclaimed water line?
That one?
Nope. Bunch of, well, actually, yeah, that is okay. I took my eyes a minute to focus.
This is the proposed, you'll see a light purple line, that's the
Yep.
proposed line under construction. And the
Okay.
darker purple line is
So
constructed.
according to LDO or policy 132, they would have been required to construct the reclaimed water line on their property frontage. But there is currently no reclaimed water line on their side of the road, so they would have basically been installing a line to nowhere, correct?
Typically, and I'll probably rely on Jamie a little bit here, but typically they'll install the line and do a cross connection to the potable system until such time as reclaimed water line is actually available.
But there, if you can
Explain
see,
that.
the dark purple line comes around on the bottom left corner there. It's coming around, it crosses the street. The light purple is not built yet.
Being built.
It's not, the light purple is not under construction yet because that's, right?
Right, the
Built with the
light
town
purple is
project.
Evans Town plan that we talked about. With plans like this that are really close to the existing reclaimed water system, we will require them to extend it across the street and across their frontage to hook it up to reclaimed water. It's only a time where we have a site plan that's very remote, way away from the system, that will allow them to install the line along their frontage and then connect it with the potable system with the appropriate backflow devices so that the line stays charged and is working until a time that the system reaches that point and we tie it into the existing reclaimed system.
So if they would have proposed it on their side, they would
Right.
have, they would have needed to put a connection across under the road.
Correct, they would have had to cross the road and build it along their frontage, so.
Okay. But they would have never been required to connect it across the road, is that correct?
No, they're not required to connect if they don't choose to, but they're still required to make the improvement.
Okay.
To meet the master plan. Some people do connect, some people don't.
Wait, are you asking
Okay.
the same question? Are you asking, would they have been required to connect that line to the other line that's being built? Or are you asking if they would be required to
When
tap
this
in?
townhome development is constructed and that light purple line becomes reclaimed water line, would they have been required to connect to it?
Yes, they would have. The policy says that they must extend reclaimed water and connect to the system.
Okay.
So,
But then there's a contradiction with the policy that says, where is it? No obligation for the improvements off-site, even though they requested it off-site.
right. I don't know what the policy talks about off-site directly. Now it says must extend reclaimed water to their site and build it along their property line at their full cost. I know it says that.
So we basically gave them, our staff gave them an exception from having to put it on their site for whatever reason. We don't know if it was for cosmetics or, they didn't like the way it looked, having it, or they wanted to irrigate.
Probably made
whatever,
more
but they
sense with the
Put it across
connection.
the street, and now they're asking not.
Right, I mean, we typically see this from time to time, because sometimes it makes sense to put it on the other side of the road to limit crossings and save cost. They could, construct this line as it's shown, and then if they choose to irrigate in the future, they could just have one crossing to their site. But the line's really out there to serve the road corridor, so if it's in the road or next to the road in an easement, as long as both sides can get access to the utility, then we consider that, meeting the policy.
When staff granted the request to move this line to the other side of the street, did staff suggest in any way to the applicant that they would be absolved from having to pay for the construction of that line?
No, we didn't. We worked through the review they proposed, I think, second or third review to put it on that side of the road because they had some issues with some conflicts with other lines and space on their side. We reviewed the plan and deemed that it met the policy, so we approved it.
Okay.
Other questions? Mr. Gerhoff?
Yeah, if and when the property, if let's say if we grant the waiver, if we change the plan, they don't have to do anything tonight, would we then be able to require the property across the street, if and when that develops, to pay for and put in the line? or their?
Correct. I mean, that's a good question. Correct. If this site never came along and the site directly across the road came in, it would be a similar requirement. So you're correct, yes.
So we wouldn't necessarily then wind up having to pay for it ourselves as town?
Correct. Right, you're right. It's all a timing thing, yeah. If
Yes.
that property came in
Pay
tomorrow.
for it.
then-
If they don't pay their portion, whether the town picks it up or another business owner picks up their portion,
Yes.
it'll be done. Imagine how that other business might feel if they find out that they're picking up a portion that should have been paid by somebody else.
And imagine how they'd feel if they got all that installed for free and all they had to do was tap into it.
Well, the developer is probably doing even more than that. I mean, is doing more than that segment. They're doing a larger segment there.
What I'm saying is if this little corner here, where it's proposed right now, came in and they had constructed the water line, whoever develops this corner area gets the reclaimed water for free.
Do you have the development proposal for across the street there that covers that? It's much larger than that little tiny segment.
Are we just talking about the corner property, correct?
Yeah, the little property where the yellow dashed line is.
Yeah, this is all under, this larger portion is all under single ownership. This is a separate owner along Austin Avenue, small house lots. We have not, to date, in my time in the planning department, seen any proposals for development on that corner.
And when they come in, will they need to be running a reclaimed water line down that tiny road at all?
Down Austin.
Which road is that? Austin?
Down Austin.
We'll have to look at the master plan and see if there's a line on there, but if there's one, yes.
And I know it was stated earlier, but could you remind me what the cost was for this segment?
Town estimates that cost to be upwards of $60,000.
Okay, just want to make sure I heard that right. Other questions, Mr. Smith? Nope, okay. And
Mr. Mayor, if I can, and I apologize for interrupting, there was some additional information that was provided during the staff's answering of questions that we would like the opportunity to respond to, if that's all right with you all, and I've consulted with the town's attorney. I'm going to call Mr. Bill Daniel back just because he was involved with Mr. Bissonette associated with how the request to move the water line came about,
Okay.
if you all will grant me that latitude.
Thank you very much for letting me address this. When the site plan was originally submitted, if you'll remember, and I'm sorry, I can't remember, is that Parkside Commons down here where the large commercial development? Okay, Parkside Commons is the large commercial development just across 55. Parkside Commons, in order for it to develop, they needed to extend a water line. That occurred after our client had purchased this property and we were proceeding with the review and approval of the site plan. That developer needed to extend the water line all along O'Kelly Chapel Road. There was no place to extend the water line. DOT does not allow, the water line. DOT does not allow water lines under pavement. And they needed to acquire an easement outside of the street. They approached our client, our property owner, to to grant an easement across the frontage of his property so that they could, the developers of Parkside Commons, could place fill and install that water line. It's a large water line. I don't remember what it is, 16, I think, inch water line. And they did that. We granted that easement. They installed that water line. When they installed that water line, they installed the water line on our side of the road. It occupied the area outside where we would obviously put utilities, where we would also have put that reclaimed water line. We're going to put the water line or the reclaimed water line. And as soon as that occurred, we deleted let me back up just a minute. That came through, so we've got the water line on our side of the road. the townhouse development proposes plans. We find out about their approved plans, and they show the reclaimed water line on the south side of O'Kelly Chapel Road. Makes total sense at that point that the reclaimed water line would be continued on the south side of O'Kelly Chapel Road. For our next submittal, we showed the water line that was being installed by the developer of Parkside Commons in front of our property, and we actually deleted the reclaimed water line, assuming that was going to be a responsibility of the property owner on the other side, because the other side was a logical place for the road to go. In fact, if you look at the plan down here from the red circle back to the left of the screen there, the reclaimed water line is on one side, the water line is on the other side. If you'll go right up to the intersection, see where the other red circle is, the reclaimed water line is on one side, the water line is on the other. The water line and the reclaimed water line are not on the same side of the road. And it's just totally logical that this reclaimed water line, where we show the yellow line, would occur on the south side of O'Kelly Chapel Road. So with that obviousness in mind, we deleted the line because it was no longer, in our mind, an improvement that should be on our site plan. We submitted that. The town staff in their review says, well, there's a line out there on the master plan. So you have to show that line as part of the site plan. You have to show us that line. So we did. We put it on the south side of the property. And we made arguments to the town staff as to why it needed to be on the south side. That's why we shifted it. We weren't trying to get it off of our side. We were reflecting where that line needs to go. And the whole policy, the way these things are installed, is something you're kind of hitting on here, but the way it's installed is the first person in is the person that gets hammered with these kind of improvements. In this particular case, had it been constructed as a segment of the line, back to the point that you were raising, the developer is required to build the line, cap the line, create a connection between that dead line and the town of Cary line, all of this called backflow prevention, all of that, just to get that segment of reclaimed water line in place. And to top it off, and this is really a shame, but to top it off, if the developer wants to irrigate from that reclaimed water line that's not yet a reclaimed water line because it has to connect to the potable system, he gets charged potable water rates because it's potable water that he's using. It's coming from the potable system, but it comes out of a tap in a reclaimed water line. So, I mean, it's a very cumbersome policy. I mean, I understand nothing's easy, and God knows nothing's easy when it comes to reclaimed water. But in this particular case, the one thing that is clear to us is the reclaimed water line needed to be on the other side of the road. Now, with it being on the other side of the road, you've got to think about placement. This road is going to be much wider than it is now. We had to dedicate considerable right-of-way and make considerable widenings because the existing roadway is essentially going to be a median in the ultimate section. We had to build the section that's going to exist outside that, more or less. That's really a bit of an overstatement, but it's not far off. And now with the water line on the other side of the road and that being an undeveloped parcel, it needs to go on that side of the road, but that parcel is not ready to develop. When that parcel is ready to develop, they will have to dedicate additional right-of-way. They will have to build additional roadway, and the water line needs to be installed not next to the existing right-of-way that's there now, because that's going to be under pavement. It needs to be constructed farther to the south than the existing right-of-way. It needs to be constructed just off of where the ultimate right-of-way is going to be. And that water line needs to be constructed and designed in concert and coordination with the water lines, sewer lines, storm drain, everything that's involved in the improvement of frontages along that road. It logically needs to be constructed as a part of the development that occurs on property across which it's going. And that's the reason we requested the shift, and I think that's the logic. Now, in all fairness, during the review process, We knew that that was going to be the case. We thought this would all be developed at the rate everything was happening out here. We thought this would probably be a moot point because we thought with the speed of development that water line would be installed. And that is the case with the part through the townhome. And I understand there's considerable interest down here in this larger tract. But our tract has developed faster than that corner parcel. I don't know what will happen on that corner parcel. And we felt that it was likely that that line would be constructed in accordance with policies. And had it been, had a site plan come in on that corner, that site plan would have had to have shown those same improvements. And the first one in would have constructed it. In fact, some of the excerpts from the review process, we were asked, I made the case for deleting the water line, and Jamie is very consistent and very competent, and stated that, although I see your point and very much agree with you, I can't just waive the reclaimed water line at a staff level. Please use this and any other reasons, the reasons that I've submitted to him in writing, please use these and any other reasons to submit a justification statement so I can draft a staff report to Town Council for approval, or show the line installation on the utility plan if the Evans Farm townhome plans get constructed before the line, before this site, then the reclaimed water line would not have to be installed. That's because we thought that development was moving along. So we took the expedient route rather than stop the process and back up and send a plan to council. We added the line back to the site plan that we had deleted in the second submission. We added that line, showed it on the south side where the line needs to go for very real reasons, and thought and hoped that it would be constructed by the people that should construct it as they develop their property. And our parcel has developed. We're obviously going to be ready for a CO before these others develop. And our parcel doesn't need that line. We're not requesting irrigation at all. It's an obligation. I understand why the obligation is on the site plan, but we feel that we should be relieved from that obligation for the reasons that I've muddled through here.
Thank you.
Mr. Daniels. Jason, I'd like to ask him a couple of questions. Mr. Daniels, just to clarify for the record, the water line you were discussing that was built by the Parkside Town Commons developers, did they compensate your client for the easement that they requested from your client?
No.
Did they install the water line that your clients are now tapping into?
They installed the water line?
Okay, so your clients didn't have to build the water line in front of the property?
No, they did not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we'll begin the deliberative phase of the hearing. Council members, additional questions, comments? I have a question. Are we allowed to suggest or, let me back up a little bit. There seems to be good arguments on both sides. The cost is $60,000. Are we allowed to take a $30,000 payment in lieu? And I'm not suggesting that they do that, but I was just wondering if something like that would be allowed. Or is it all or none?
I don't think that they have requested a modification of the payment in lieu, and so I don't think you would be authorized
Right.
to grant something that has not been requested.
Right. Okay.
So then it'd be a denial, and then they can come back to us another time and
Correct.
request a payment in lieu. Okay.
Other comments, questions?
I'll make comments. I mean,
Okay.
I have an opinion about this, if this is the time for that.
Sure.
You know, the reason why our town has the infrastructure that we have and that we appreciate so much is because everybody pays their share. And we've been very upfront from the beginning about what our obligations are. So when someone buys that land and decides to put a child care on that site, he takes into account the fact that it is on a road that is going to be wide with a median, and he's going to have to pay that frontage. He takes into account, or he should take into account in his business model, that it has a water line that needs to be installed. So And whether he chooses to tap into that or not is irrelevant, because it's not just for him, it is for the whole area. It's the contribution. And just because that business doesn't tap into it now, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't tap into it 4 years from now or sell to another owner who taps into it in the future. So it has to be there for this property to be served in the future. So I'm not sympathetic to this case of like, hey, we've spent so much money on this road already and we're not even going to tap into this line. These are not arguments that make me sympathetic. Now, I do see, and I don't hear anything that said that the staff absolved the applicant from paying or installing the water line when it was moved across the street. It sounds like we were working cooperatively with them at their request to move it. I imagine that if we really couldn't move it, it could have been accommodated on site just further in towards their building or something. I don't know how that would have happened, but we were working cooperatively with them, but there has been no suggestion from our staff when they did that they were going to dismiss the obligation of paying. The very least that I would see is reasonable is a payment in lieu because of factors of having that road needing to be widened would be a payment in lieu, and I'm not even sure if 50% is the appropriate amount or if it is 100%. I don't know. But I don't want to start getting into the situation where people feel like they've spent a lot of money even though they should have anticipated the cost of these infrastructure improvements, and we start saying, oh, well, you don't have to do it, and you don't have to do it, and you don't. When we do that, our citizens are going to end up paying, or another business owner is going to end up paying, and I don't think that is appropriate for us to start relaxing that standard.
Mr. Mayor, as you were just discussing with Mr. Silverstein, the request before you was for a complete waiver of construction of the line and no payment in lieu. The applicant would like to modify their request at this time, if you'll let Mr. Barron speak to that.
Okay.
If the council is concerned with the equities associated with what appears to be, from outward perspectives, 100% shift of the obligation of construction, we would be willing to work with staff to come up with a fee. We've looked at it a little bit further, and we think it's closer to maybe $34,000. We're willing to work with the staff of what the estimate of cost of construction is and shoulder the burden for 1/2 of that cost so that the person across the street isn't stomaching 100% of the cost of construction.
Are you saying that you think 1/2 the cost is $34,000 or the cost for the entire segment is $34,000?
The cost of the entire segment for construction is $34,000. Again, we're willing to work with staff on what the exact cost is, but we're willing to work with staff on what that number is, and we'll commit to doing 1/2 of that cost.
The reservation I have is that if staff is telling us they think it's about $61,000, you're saying it's $34,000, you pay a payment in lieu, and it turns out the whole line itself is $61,000, or let's say logically in a couple years, costs have risen and now it's $75,000 to do, and then we have just basically shortchanged the citizens and the business owners. So if we're going to go with some kind of 50% cost share, we've got to very carefully figure out how we're going to do that, and I don't know how that can be executed. Can money be put into an account, and then when that line gets built, can it be drawn down and the difference refunded to the developer over time? I mean, are there any kind of
Do we do that for any other payment in lieu?
Do we do that?
No, I think from a staff perspective, we'd prefer the simpler approach of a,
Just take the money and run?
right.
Okay.
My question for staff is, All Stars Academy has added 2 lanes to their frontage, is that correct?
Roughly 2.5. It's a 2-lane road now, and it's proposed to be 6-lane median divided, so roughly 2.
How many lanes would be added to the south side?
The same. They widened
Same.
half the road.
So they did half, okay. Are we allowed to consider the amended request from the applicant tonight, or is that something that has to come back?
I would defer to Mr. Silverstein.
You can consider it. I think the better move would be to defer this matter to enable additional evidence to be presented to you, because it doesn't, as Ms. Robbins was pointing out, you've got some numbers that are at variance with each other, and you don't really have any set numbers that staff and the applicant have agreed on. So it's probably better to defer it to enable them to come together on some sort of resolution in terms of what the payment in lieu should be.
And may I follow up on that? If there is a denial, do they have the right to come back and ask for that same, make that same request?
I believe they,
Or do they have to wait a
I'd
period
have
of
to,
time?
yeah, I would want to consult with the town attorney on that, but I believe that would be a different request because this evening they have requested a waiver of financial responsibility. And so I think a payment in lieu would be a different modification, and I think they would be able to come back with that.
And if we deferred the waiver, can we still address the site plan? Because we're,
I want to interject a couple things. One, I think if they were to come back with a different, if you were to deny this plan tonight, it would be subject to a 12-month, not a 12-year, 12-month waiting period. There's always the option to request a waiver to that waiting period if they've substantially changed their, it's a fairly easy process.
and a question on that. The one-year waiver, does it have to be requested, or can we make that motion and give that waiver tonight?
I think it's more appropriate for the request for the waiver to come from the applicant.
Okay, just curious.
And to answer your other question, now I forgot what it was. I had it, it was right there.
About site plan.
Yes, you could not approve the site plan if you were to not grant the modification because you'd be approving the plan that was already approved, which shows the line on the south side.
Okay.
And just another point of information, and speaking with staff, and they can come up and speak to this if you'd like them to. I think Mr. Barron's clients and our staff are fairly confident that they can come to agreement on the cost for the payment in lieu. This is something that happens kind of every day around here for other, situations. It doesn't always come to you, so you don't see it. But I think everyone feels pretty confident that together they could come to an acceptable amount. So if a condition were worded something like, applicant agrees to pay 1/2 the staff determined construction costs, I'm just talking off the top of my head, but if we could come up with some language like that, I think that could be a condition, potential condition of approval that staff at this point feels pretty comfortable that can happen.
And the process for that is we would make a motion to that effect, and it would come back for ratification at our next council meeting?
Right, the written resolution would come back to you like it always does right now. I've scheduled that for the February 26th council meeting.
So how would you, if we were to make such a motion, we have options here to approve the request or to deny the request?
And I handed out pieces of paper with, right, so we actually have really two votes again, as we sort of normally do. The first is the vote to grant the waiver, and so really you'd be granting the waiver with the condition of the payment in lieu of 1/2 the amount, and then there'd be a second vote on the site plan.
And does this site plan still contain the line drawn on it on the south side?
I think it would come off.
It would not.
Yes.
Since they'd be making a payment in lieu of the line would no
The
longer be
line will
shown.
come off, okay.
Let me weigh in for a second, too, if I could, please, because the way the motion reads here is that I move that we approve the modification request made by the applicant, and technically that's not correct because they've asked for a waiver. So you'd really, I think, have to have the applicant modify their request to a payment in lieu rather than a waiver, because I don't think you can put a condition on a waiver.
Okay.
Okay.
So they can make that request verbally?
That's a good question. It really is. It's got to be, I think if it's a change in condition, you can't do that. But theoretically, a payment in lieu is a subset of a waiver. That would be something lesser than a waiver. So I think there's enough connection there probably for the applicant to verbally make that amended request before you this evening.
Jason?
And it's our understanding that that's a request that you've made?
Yes, our amended request is for approval of payment of 1/2 of a fee in lieu for the construction costs associated with the line that is currently shown on the south side of Green Level Church Road.
As agreed to by staff and, of course, your client.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. France is ready to make a motion. Mr. France.
Okay. For the reasons discussed, I move that we approve the applicant's modification request for a waiver for the payment of half the cost of construction for the reclaimed water line with an amount to be determined by the staff and the applicant.
There's a motion.
Is that good?
Can you make
Got
it,
to take it without the waiver.
could you make it that move the applicant's amended request? And I think that would cover it.
All
I
right,
move
so
that we
you
approve.
withdraw the-
I withdraw my motion. I move that we approve the applicant's amended request, modification request for payment of half the cost of construction for the reclaimed water line with the amount to be determined by staff and the applicant.
There's a motion
Second.
and the second. Further discussion. Mr. Silverstein, that sound okay to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Site plan?
For the reasons discussed, I move that we approve the proposed site plan with the conditions as stated, as it meets all the approval criteria set forth in section 3.9.2I of the LDO. This approval is conditioned upon the following: that the applicant must satisfactorily address all remaining DRC comments on the master plan set submitted for signature.
There is a motion.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Typically, when we accept a payment in lieu, we have a corollary condition for site plan approval, which not on your sheet, since we weren't anticipating this, that says the applicant must make the payment in lieu amount prior to obtaining any further Town of Cary permits.
Would you like to amend?
I will
your
amend my motion to say that.
vote? And Jack, would you second the amendment?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Silverstein, is that sufficient?
That's acceptable, yes.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you for working with us to get through this. Our second quasi-judicial public hearing is for E38 Elementary School. As shown on the agenda, there are three parts to this hearing: an owner-initiated annexation petition, special use permit, and site plan. When we're ready to vote, we need to vote on the annexation first, followed by the special use and site plan. An overview of the hearing procedures and detailed rules are attached to the printed agenda. All speakers who want to speak during this public hearing must be administered an oath by Mrs. Johnson to my right. We'll pause for a moment just to allow those individuals who would like to speak at the public hearing to approach Mrs. Johnson and receive their oaths. And I'm going to pause until that has been completed. I'll now ask council members if they've had any site visits, ex parte communications, financial relationships, specialized knowledge, or close relationship to an affected person to disclose, starting on my right with Mrs. Robinson.
No, I have nothing.
Mr. Smith, I have none. Mr. France?
No.
Mr. Yerhoff? No. Okay. Based on the disclosures we've heard from council members, I invite anyone to the podium who's been sworn in to speak if you have an objection to council members' participation in this hearing. Seeing no one, I'll open the quasi-judicial public hearing and recognize Mr. Hales of our staff who will introduce this hearing. Mr. Hales.
Thank you, Council. The next item on tonight's agenda is a request by the Wake County Public School System for annexation, special use approval, and site plan approval for a new school project located at 3605 Pleasant Grove Church Road in the northern part of Cary. Property is located within the ETJ, but not within the corporate limits, hence the annexation request. It's located on Pleasant Grove Church Road, right at the crossing of NC 540. It straddles the Wake County, Durham County property line, surrounded predominantly by vacant land. Most of that is in Durham County and is zoned light industrial and/or rural residential. However, their long-term land use plan shows the entire area for industrial uses. Areas adjacent to and in the vicinity in the Cary jurisdiction are all zoned office research and development, which is the equivalent of their light industrial zoning. Pleasant Grove Business Park is located slightly to the northeast. To the southeast, across I-540 is the Nelson Road Industrial Park, further down off Pleasant Grove Church. Pleasant Grove Church Road is identified in the Comprehensive Transportation Plan as a 4-lane median divided thoroughfare. Is currently a 2-lane cross-section. There is no transit in the area, nor are there any parks, recreation, and cultural resources requirements located in the vicinity of the project, nor are there any streams identified on the site plan which would impact development. The site is currently wooded, it's forested. There are 2 large diameter potential champion trees are located in this corner of the site near the interchange, not really interchange, near the overpass. They're not proposing any development in that portion of the site, and those trees are to be preserved on the property. The request is for a site plan for approval of a 102,000 square foot school. The site has access from both Pleasant Grove Church Road in the northeast and Comstock Road coming out of Durham County to the south. The road access off of Pleasant Grove Church will predominantly be for parents and student drop-off, and bus access, I believe, will be from the southern part of the property. Stormwater treatment will be handled in a stormwater device within the bus loop. The portion in Durham County, you'll notice, has no buildings or structure improvements. It's being used strictly for emergency access to the rear of the building and for queuing during the parent drop-off and pickup times. Architecturally, the building is predominantly brick and is compliant with the town's architectural standards. They're requesting no modifications. This is a perspective view from the parking lot looking toward the southwest. Looking toward the front, very similar. And looking at the rear, you can see the larger classroom wings which stretch out behind the main common part of the school, which are higher at 2 stories. The site plan does include 2 modifications to the town's development regulations. Modification A is a request for a payment in lieu for 1/2 of the median required in Pleasant Grove Church Road, as well as sidewalk from the property line, or from the access drive headed south toward the bridge. The second one being a elimination of connectivity to the west, to the vacant property to the west in Durham. Just to give you a better idea of their proposed road improvements, the median would obviously run across their frontage and sidewalk going from there to the bridge. And looking at the wider picture of the vacant properties in Durham. That concludes staff's presentation this time. We'll be back after the applicant's presentation to provide you some additional observations. Thank you.
This time we'll call on the applicant's attorney to present arguments and evidence in support of the application by addressing the applicable approval criteria.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the Town Council. My name is Kenneth Haywood, Post Office Door 1429 in Raleigh. I am with the law firm of Boxley, Bolton, Garber, and Haywood, and very pleased to be before you again tonight with another school to talk to you about in terms of the town of Cary. I am here on behalf of the Wake County Board of Education to talk to you about an elementary school tonight. There are, as you have heard from staff, a number of different requests and approvals before you. Let me very quickly talk to you about some of the individuals we have tonight that will be presenting evidence in support of these requests before you. We have Ken Loring, who is a civil engineer with CLH Design, Renee Pfeiffer, who is a landscape architect, site designer with CLH Design. We have Jeff Hockendale with SEPI Engineering. We have Jim Copeland, Mosley Architects. We have Sherry Green and Betty Parker with the Wake County School System. We have Michael Moore, who's a state certified general appraisal to talk in terms of real estate appraisal information. So there is before you tonight 3 different approvals. There's the annexation, special use permit, and site plan. The way that I'm planning to present this information to you is to have many of the findings of fact for the special use permit and site plan overlap. So in order not to be repetitious, we're going to present one comprehensive proposal to you in terms of all the evidence, and then answer any questions you have to be able to show that we do in fact have the evidence to meet each of the findings of fact for the special use permit and the site plan. The school, just very briefly, and we're going to get into much more detail with this, is a new elementary school. It is currently scheduled to open in the summer of 2016, so we're on a very aggressive time schedule in terms of having open. It is, at this point in time, a new school design. It is not one that there is a school that's already been built. It is the largest elementary school design that the school system has constructed at this point in time. There would be 52 teaching spaces that would be provided. We would have in the main building that you see before you an 800 capacity student population. We do show in the site plan modular buildings. We're not asking for that approval tonight, but we do show where those approximate locations would be. That would house approximately another 100 students. What you'll hear tonight in terms of testimony from the various individuals is that the site plan that has been put before you, the traffic analysis that was completed, the interior queuing is all anticipating 900 students on site. So we have gone ahead and developed now the capacity for 900 students, even though we're talking to you right now about 800 in terms of once it reaches its population as it generates over time, but it has been cited now for having full capacity whenever that occasion arises. The first item before you is the annexation request. You have that as part of your packet. I'm not going to dwell very long on that because as part of the packet we believe that it does comply with all the requirements of the North Carolina General Statutes in terms of having the site annexed, and we do ask for your approval in terms of the annexation. The second piece is the special use permit. School is a special use in your office research and development zoning district. We do have, as part of your package, a sworn testimony of Renee Pfeiffer dated October 8th of 2014, in which she swears to the various findings of fact, which we would ask to be included in the record in terms of part of our evidence. She is here tonight and will also be speaking to you. In addition to that, you have the various other findings of fact that are provided by the other witnesses. And at this time, I would like to begin with Ms. Pfeiffer to go ahead and come down to present evidence to you in terms of generally what the site entails. And then after she completes that testimony, and then we will go through the rest of our witnesses and certainly answer any questions you have during our presentation. We have all these different individuals here. I'm not planning on calling each of them to testify before you. I wanted to list each of those individuals that are here tonight so that you would know they're here. So if there's any particular concerns you have, that we can certainly address those as we're going through this. Thank you very much. Ms. Pfeiffer, if you could please introduce yourself for the Town Council, providing for them your qualifications before you provide your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Haywood. Good evening. My name is Renee Pfeiffer. I'm with CLH Design. I am a registered landscape architect and one of the principals of CLH Design. As Mr. Haywood mentioned, this will be a 900-student core elementary school. The site is located close to the Briar Creek area and will alleviate crowding in nearby elementary schools. Sidewalk connectivity is provided throughout the site and to both right-of-ways along Comstock Road and Pleasant Grove Church Road. All landscape buffers, streetscapes, and additional landscaping requirements per the LDO have been met, in addition to the 100-foot thoroughfare corridor you see here along NC 540. There are 4 champion trees on site, 3 located in this area here and 1 along the buffer to the north. Those are all being preserved and protected. This site is not adjacent to any existing or planned neighborhoods, and the program elements such as playfields, walking tracks, play equipment, and additional green space is provided along the within the site. And along with that is the siting of 4 future mobiles in this location. The traffic is controlled with approximately 2,200 linear feet of parent stacking. This exceeds the NCDOT MSTA requirement for a 900-student elementary school. This will help alleviate traffic on nearby roadways. As for vehicular circulation, parents will enter the site off of Pleasant Grove Church Road. They will queue along the parent loop in this location. They will go through the staff parking lot, and drop-off is located here at the main entrance to the building. There are bike racks located in this area, as well as seat walls and flagpoles. After the drop-off, they will exit the site via Pleasant Grove Church Road if headed to the north, or Comstock Road if headed to the south and towards I-40. Additional staff parking is located just to the east. This is approximately 72 spaces. Staff and visitor parking in this area is about 48 spaces. Fire lane is located off the parent queuing lane in this location, and it provides adequate access for fire trucks, and signage and striping is provided in this location as well. We do not provide roadway connectivity to the west. In addition, for these parcels being zoned for light industrial, safety and security is our #1 focus for staff and students, and connections to this area may create an opportunity for unwanted guests to come on site, as well as short-circuiting the parent queue line if and when this parcel does develop. Large multipurpose field is located to the north of the site with a walking track around it. Adjacent to that is the 3-5 play area with play equipment located here, and the paved play located in this area. This area is surrounded by fencing for security. Kindergarten through 2nd grade play area is along the east side of the building. In this location, they as well have a play structure and paved play and some green space as well. This area is also fenced off. Back behind the building, kind of in this nook here, is the pre-K play area, and it's adjacent to the pre-K classroom, so they have direct access to their play area, exterior play area. The buses will enter off of Comstock Road. The bus loop is quite large. It's got a large, wide sidewalk for accessibility. This is the bus entrance. Service area is located off the bus loop. This will be will be enclosed with a brick wall, and then there will be gates on it that will be opaque. So it will be completely enclosed from view. As I mentioned earlier, we've cited 4 future mobiles in this location adjacent to the 2nd grade classroom wings. Even though we're not asking for approval of the mobiles at this time, infrastructure such as stormwater management, parent queuing lengths have been accommodated for the future if and when the mobiles are needed. As far as utilities go, there's water along Pleasant Grove Church Road. So we will be tapping into that water line. We are siting an on-site private pump station in this location. And the force main will extend up Pleasant Grove Church to a gravity sewer main about approximately 700 feet to the north. Road improvements, as Mr. Hales mentioned, it's a 4-lane median divided road. We are requesting a payment in lieu for half of that median and the sidewalk along Pleasant Grove Church Road. The reasoning is because at this point, there's no development on this side of the road, and because of the proximity to the bridge. As the fee or the payment in lieu for the sidewalk is because we don't want to direct pedestrians to a bridge that does not have a sidewalk over it, and we don't want them to be walking adjacent to travel lanes. As far as additional improvements on Pleasant Grove Church Road, we are at the site drive, including a right turn lane into the site drive and a left turn lane into the site drive. Comstock Road is being widened for half of a standard collector section. This will include bike lane, curb and gutter, sidewalk along our frontage, as well as a cul-de-sac for turnaround. Currently, Comstock Road is a dead-end road. So we're providing an adequate turnaround for vehicles coming down Comstock that don't want to go to the school site. At this point, I'll hand it over to our traffic engineer, Jeff Hokenottle, to discuss some additional roadway improvements. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jeff Hokenottle. I work with SEPI Engineering. I am SEPI Engineering's Traffic Engineering Department Manager. I have 15 years of experience in traffic engineering, and I'm a registered professional engineer in North Carolina. We conducted the traffic study, and as has mentioned several times, that we included a 900-student core capacity, so we looked at all future trips from this site. The study was completed and reviewed by the Division 5, District 1, District 2 engineers, congestion management, MSTA section, City of Durham, and Town of Cary, and has been approved, reviewed and approved, to help mitigate congestion as shown in the map. I'll start with the intersection at World Trade and Page Road. The green improvements as shown were improvements that are, green and blue, are responsibility of the Wake County Public Schools side. Looking at Page Road and World Trade Boulevard, we are monitor for intersection, well, actually signalization at that intersection. 200 feet, we're going to be restriping World Trade Boulevard to include a 200 foot of storage for a left turn lane, as well as a shared left and right turn lane at that location. As Renee mentioned, we're going to construct a 100-foot storage southbound right turn lane at site driveway 1, and a northbound left turn lane at side driveway 1 as well, and at the constructing of a cul-de-sac in Comstock Road. The red and yellow improvement requirements are to be completed by an adjacent development with Wake County Public Schools to participate in either funding of those improvements. Betty Parker will speak to that after my presentation. Basically, those were we were going to help fund that to help speed up those improvements. Those are actually a requirement already of the development that is located to the west of Page Road, the Bethpage development. Specifically, looking at the intersection of Globe and Page Road, we'll monitor for to see if it meets signal warrants at the intersection at Globe and Page, and then we'll help fund the construction of a northbound right turn lane there. We will also monitor for signal warrants for 5 years at the intersection of Airport Road, Page and Page, as well as help with the funding of the 100-foot northbound right turn lane at that location. All the yellow improvements that are shown in this map are a responsibility of the Bethpage or adjacent approved development. If you have any questions, feel free to answer.
Thank you.
Good evening, Betty Parker, Senior Director of Real Estate Services with the school system. What I wanted to follow up on just very quickly, and technology is beyond me there. What I wanted to follow up on very quickly is to underscore what Jeff had mentioned about the items identified by these red boxes. Everything in yellow as well as red is currently an obligation of the Bethpage developer as part of their site plan approvals with Durham County and the City of Durham. So the green ones that were necessitated by our traffic study, we're doing. The red ones have come out of some collaboration discussions that we've had with DOT in both the Wake County and the Durham jurisdictions, County of Durham, City of Durham, and the Bethpage developer. Their restriction has been difficult for them to overcome. There are several acquisitions that are necessary for Bethpage to proceed, and they lack condemnation authority. So that's what's held up some of what we consider the background improvements on which our improvements are predicated. So out of those discussions to try to find the best way to be sure that all of this is as complete as possible when the school opens, we sat down with that very large group twice and have come to the conclusion that by our assistance with these areas in pink and some changes that have been made by agreement of the rest of those parties, we've helped sort of come past that tipping point that will allow the Bethpage developer to complete all of these development improvements that are warranted before the school system opens this school next year. So the idea is, once we complete our road improvements, everything all the way up Page Road will be done, with the exception of any unwarranted traffic signals at that time. So we're providing those so that you're aware of the scope that we're tentatively committed to, but we have not finalized the precise terms. We're waiting to hear back from the Durham Department of Transportation. So we're heading in that direction. I just wanted to be sure that we drew a sharp line between what we understand will be our requirements, which we're completely committed to, but we're also committed to completing this sort of neighborhood approach so that everything's done in the students' pathways to and from school are as safe as possible. The other thing that I wanted to just mention as an aside, why on earth would we put a school way out here, not close to any elementary schools? And the answer is I can give you 47 reasons. That's every other undeveloped site in the area that proved unsuitable for schools. This one's it. This one is the trifecta of loveliness. It's expensive, it's next to the highway, and it hangs over into Durham. But it's the only site that fit within the target ring. This will serve primarily a lot of the students in Briar Creek, which are bleeding down and impacting Austin Ridge, which is bleeding down and impacting Mills Park, which is bleeding down and impacting Cedar Forks. We have a number of CAP schools south of this site, as well as north in Leesville, at Leesville Road and Sycamore Creek. This will help with a domino effect. This will help bring a lot of the students in that Briar Creek area back into their sub-community. So it seems an odd place to put a school in Cary, but we're thrilled to have a developable site. Unfortunately, it was about the only choice. So that hopefully helps understand that sort of the fabric of where this fits and how many strings will be affected when we pull this one. I'm happy to address any other questions on the background or the school location or that agreement. And I'm sure Kenneth will think of something else. But thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Members of the council, as I indicated before, you do have the sworn statement of Renee Pfeiffer as part of your package, as well as the staff's observations. As far as my understanding of reviewing the staff's observations and their staff report, in terms of the various findings, there's not any objection in terms of the evidence that has been proffered on the site plan, the special use permit that's before you. However, there's one item that the staff felt that needed additional testimony in terms of the special use permit, which they believe need to be by a qualified real estate appraiser. So if I could at this time call Michael Moore to the podium to address item number 4 on the special use permit, which is the question of whether or not the proposed use or development of the land will or will not substantially injure the value of adjoining or abutting property. Mr. Moore, if you could come in. Mr. Moore, have you already previously been sworn in? Okay, if you could handle the microphone right there. Mr. Moore, if you could begin by providing your name, business address, and any qualifications to the town council.
My name's Michael Moore. I'm a state certified general appraiser employed with Worthy and Wachtel. I've had about 18 years of fee appraisal experience prior to 25 years in the banking industry.
Mr. Moore, have you visited the subject property?
I have.
And in your review in the subject property, have you considered whether or not the proposed use of the site as an elementary school would or would not have any adverse effects on any of the adjoining property owners?
In my judgment, it will not.
Well, first of all, have you considered whether or not it would or would not have any adverse effects?
It's my judgment that it would not adversely impact the abutting properties.
Okay. So in terms of the abutting properties, do you believe that the proposed school would or would not injure the value of any of the adjoining property owners?
I believe it would not.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Moore, that's all the questions I have for you. As I've indicated, we certainly have additional folks here that can answer any of your questions, but I'm also mindful in terms of the lateness of the hour. I will conclude by stating that the Wake County Public School System would request that you entertain and pass a motion for annexation of this parcel into the jurisdiction of the town of Cary, that as to the special use permit request, since this is in the zoning district that we previously talked about, staff and I both did, needing a special use permit, that you find that that you entertain a motion and pass a motion that each of the findings of fact necessary for a special use permit have been met by the Wake County Board of Education and Public School System. With regards to the site plan request, that you propose a motion for approval of our site plan and find that each of the findings of fact required for those have been met by the Wake County Public School System and the Wake County Board of Education. There are two modifications that you've heard about that are part of this. One would be the payment in lieu. You had heard testimony from Ms. Pfeiffer in terms of why we're requesting the modification in terms of payment in lieu. And with regards to the connectivity, given the fact that this is a unique parcel that's next door to Durham County in terms of connectivity to a different county, and the fact that between that and the fact that we do have to be mindful of security, traffic, and safety concerns to the site, that the connectivity issues that normally would be present in a site with more residential or other uses really are not applicable here because of who our adjoining property owners are. So we would request that those modifications to the site plan also be approved. That would be the conclusion of our testimony, but as I've indicated, we certainly are available for any questions that the mayor or the members of the town council may have on this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This time I'll invite other speakers who have been sworn in who wish to speak in support of the application to approach the podium one at a time. Seeing no one, we'll move to, I'll invite cross-examinations of witnesses who have testified in support of the request. Moving forward, we'll open the hearing for those who are opposed to the request, and I would invite you to approach the podium one at a time. Seeing no one, I'll call on town staff for any testimony they wish to add.
Thank you again, Council, and I'll keep it brief because I believe the applicant's team hit most of my points already. The first modification we're going to go over in detail is the payment in lieu for half the median and approximately 375 foot of sidewalk along Pleasant Grove Church Road. Again, the median construction is really not feasible at this time due to a lack of improvements on the eastern side of the road. That property just hasn't developed it to this point. The sidewalk to the south, there is no sidewalk farther south along Pleasant Grove Church Road, or more importantly, crossing the bridge itself. So any sidewalk provided along this frontage would dump pedestrians directly into the travel lane on the bridge. There's no provision for a pedestrian there. So that just is not desirable at this time. Connectivity to the west, again, it's a school. The surrounding property is not really zoned or anticipated to develop with uses that are compatible to that type of use, as well as the unique safety and security concerns with controlling access to a school campus. That concludes staff's observations this time. We'll be available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, this time I'd invite any cross-examination of staff's comments. No? All right. We'll now invite anyone who's been sworn in if they have any objections to the competency of evidence or testimony. Seeing none, does either party believe information's been presented tonight for a continuance of this hearing? Nope. We'll now begin the deliberative phase of the hearing. Council members, questions or comments?
I'll make a comment. I think, and maybe Kevin, you could correct me, but by annexing this property, Cary is now entering into the third county. Is that right? Have we already been in Durham County before?
We're not annexing the Durham County property. We're annexing the portion of the property that stops at the Wake County line.
Really? So we don't annex into the whole, we don't do the whole site? Just
Correct.
right up to that line?
Correct.
That's interesting.
There's a property line there.
Huh.
But our site plan includes the Durham County portion or does not?
Our site plan technically does not. It does include the Durham County portion for informational purposes, and you'll see attached to the staff report, Durham County has actually already approved the portion in Durham County.
Ah, okay. That's interesting. I guess it doesn't make one difference to us because it's not taxable property in any way. It's just, okay.
Other questions or comments? If not, we can move into we can close the public comment portion of the hearing and ask council for motions first to annex.
Make a motion to approve the annexation 14A-11.
Second.
There's a motion, a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now motion for special use permit.
For the reasons discussed, I move that we approve the request for special use made by the applicant as the request meets all of the approval criteria of Section 3.83 of the LDO.
Second.
There's a motion and a second.
I'll make a comment. I mean, because I think we're going to hear from citizens about this. This is not our first choice for a site. This is not really very desirable for Wake County or for us, really. I mean, it's clearly a kind of a scrappy piece of land that they're taking. It's undesirable for Cary because we're taking land out of our taxable base for a school that will very, very indirectly benefit our students. I mean, it will benefit everybody, but it'll very indirectly benefit. But this is just an example of how desperate our county has gotten in finding available sites for schools. And I want to make that point because we heard from residents who live in neighborhoods adjacent to another proposed school site. And they were saying, this isn't a good school site because it's, because it's over here near another county. But that one at least had neighborhoods that, Cary neighborhoods that were right up against it. So it's just a testament to how desperate the school system has gotten. And, in support of our school system, we have to do what we need to do.
I would just say it was kind of interesting with the last council meeting where we had folks show up and raise concerns about a school being sited at the edge of a county and along a busy road. They're not here tonight.
No.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the special use permit. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Site plan.
Modifications?
Modifications on site plan, sorry.
For the reasons discussed, I move that we approve the modification request made by the applicant as the request meets all of the approval criteria of the applicable sections of the LDO.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Site plan.
Oh, man, this is a long one. For the reasons discussed, I move that we approve the proposed site plan with the conditions as stated below as it meets all of the approval criteria set forth in Section 3.9.2I of the LDO. I don't have to read all these? Do I not have to read this?
I think as long as you reference the conditions on this particular page, you're fine.
The approval is conditioned upon the following numbers 1 through 8
In the staff report?
in the staff report.
It's actually on page 3 of the suggested motions for annex. Is that what you're?
Yeah, I'm reading it. That's what,
Is that just at the bottom say page 3 of 3?
page 3 of 3.
Yes. On the
Okay, let me try it again.
E38 elementary school.
Okay, let me try it again. For the reasons discussed, I move that we approve the proposed site plan with the conditions as stated below as it meets all of the approval criteria set forth in Section 3.9.2I of the LDO. This approval is conditioned upon the following numbers 1 through 8 on page 3 of 3, elementary school E38, is that right?
Correct.
There's a motion.
Second.
And the second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And that
That's
takes
it.
care of this one, so I'll close the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Hales.
Thank you.
Thank you, yes. One more school, yay. Our
We didn't even approve the last one. That was a public hearing.
Our last quasi-judicial public hearing is for Phillips Place Townhomes. An overview of the hearing procedures are detailed rules are attached to the printed agenda. All speakers who want to speak during this public hearing must be administered and oath by Mrs. Johnson to my right. We're going to pause for a moment to allow those individuals who'd like to speak at the public hearing to approach Mrs. Johnson and receive their oaths. The council will pause from saying anything or doing anything until this has been completed.
I can't.
I'll now ask council members for any site visits, ex parte communication, financial relationship, specialized knowledge, or close relationship to an affected person to disclose, starting on my left with Mr. Yarhouse.
I have none.
Ms. France?
No, sir.
I have not. Mr. Smith? Mrs. Robinson?
Have none.
Okay, very well. Based on the disclosures we've heard from council members, I'd invite anyone to the podium who's been sworn in to speak if you have an objection to a council member's participation in this hearing. Seeing no one, I'll open the quasi-judicial public hearing and call on Mr. Hales of our staff to introduce this item. Mr. Hales.
Thank you. As you mentioned, the final hearing on tonight's agenda is a request by Phillips Place Associates, LLC, for development of a townhome project at the terminus of River Pine Drive in the Phillips Place PDD. Council may remember they saw this track a couple of years ago, January 2013. It was denied. A very similar proposal for 116 townhome units on this property, track 2 of the Phillips Place PDD, approximately 33 acres. It is located between two proposed thoroughfares and collectors. There's a collector that runs across the northern portion of the site, which is Mahal, known now as Mahal Drive since the Brickyard plan was before council recently. And then McCrimmon Parkway extension runs across the southern boundary. Right now, access is provided through River Pine Drive in the Phillips Place PDD. Surrounded by predominantly vacant land, and then the Phillips Place detached residential project to the east, the Petty Farm residential properties located to the south. There are no Parks and Recreation and Cultural Resources master plan improvements identified that affect this site directly. For informational purposes, there is a proposed greenway corridor that runs along the stream buffer that separates the northeastern portion of the Phillips Place PDD from the remainder. That greenway easement was dedicated with the detached residential portion, and a small section of street-side trail was constructed right there along River Pine Drive at the stream crossing itself. This shows a portion of the stream buffers and the impact the development of the site. For whatever reason, our GIS maps have cut the stream buffers out here, but this stream buffer actually continues down and connects to this detached portion here, which we'll talk about a little bit earlier because it does play into some of the applicant's modification requests. Site is currently wooded. River Pine Drive is constructed to the eastern side of the stream buffer that kind of divides the detached residential product from the townhome product. And the proposed subdivision plan is very similar to the plan that council saw in January of 2013, with a couple of notable differences when it comes to the modifications themselves. 106 townhomes arrayed, River Pine Drive extended into the site, then a couple internal streets connecting down to the future McCrimmon Parkway corridor. Stormwater management handled in the northern portion of the site where the two stream buffers converge. Applicant is still requesting 5 modifications to the town's development standards. Modifications A and C relate to McCrimmon Parkway and the connection there. There is a connectivity modification in regards to the number of units served off a single point of access, and then 2 connectivity waivers going to adjacent properties north and west. Looking briefly at McCrimmon Parkway, there's an existing terminus of McCrimmon Parkway right now where it connects Lewis Stevens Road. The other on the western side where it intersects NC 55. At some point, those two are projected to connect. The CSX Railroad corridor is obviously a significant impediment to that connection at some point, just to give you an idea how that lays out. The applicant is requesting a payment in lieu for half of the cross-section of McCrimmon Parkway. You can see here where the future McCrimmon Parkway alignment would be and where the applicant's property line falls. The applicant's request is that the town accept a payment of $285,216.20 in lieu of that construction. Ordinance requires connections to adjacent properties every 1,250 to 1,500 feet. In this case, a connection to the north would have been required. I've kind of drawn in here the approximate future Mahal Drive alignment based on the corridor comprehensive transportation plan and the projected plans that were submitted and approved for Brickyard. River Pine Drive would extend and go to the north. Rather than construct that, they have requested the town accept dedication of right-of-way shown in the solid white lines and dedication of necessary construction easements or anticipated construction easements to allow construction of that road in the future. However, they've not proposed to make any financial guarantee or payment in lieu nor do any construction beyond where River Pine Drive intersects their north-south internal street. In connection to the south, and I'll note, and as it is mentioned in the staff report as well, this isn't actually the applicant's request. This is a staff observation based on the plan they've drawn. McCrimmon Parkway, as I mentioned earlier, has to cross CSX Railroad, which will make this a grade separated crossing. With all of our experience dealing with the railroad, it's unlikely they'll be able to secure a at-grade crossing in that location, which is going to put McCrimmon Parkway, where they're showing their flare turnouts to connect that McCrimmon Parkway. There's going to be a significant grade difference there, and that connection is probably not going to happen as shown on the plans. Connection to the west, fairly straightforward, being, again, the CSX Railroad being a fairly significant impediment to connections to the west, and with the future Mahal Drive and McCrimmon Parkway to the south, is it necessary to have a local connection? And finally, the number of units served off a single point of access. The ordinance requires that no more than 100 residential units be developed without access to a second public street. In this case, the existing single-family detached portion of the Phillips Place PDD was developed with 91 units. There are future units to be built, but they didn't have access, and there's a cell tower down there as well that was complicating development at the time. So 91 accesses are currently served off a single point of access on Lewis Stevens Drive. This project would add another 106 units to that single point of access on Lewis Stevens Drive. And in addition, this is a two-tiered modification. Right now, that single point of access where River Pine Drive crosses the stream buffer would be the only point of access for the 106 townhomes. So the 106 townhomes then plus the 91, 197 total off the single point of access. The applicant has proposed a emergency access drive, very similar to the one that was proposed last time with some improvements. Last time it was proposed to be gravel, and now it's proposed to be a 20-foot ribbon pave asphalt section. There were concerns about gate access between the police and fire department. The applicant has now done some research and proposed a siren actuated gate, which will activate either for the police car or the fire department. They won't have to stop and get out of the vehicle to access that gate. So some improvements have been made, and they'll go into more detail. That concludes staff's presentation at this time. We'll be back following the applicant's presentation to provide some additional observations. Thank you.
Thank you. This time we'll call on the applicant's attorney to present arguments and evidence in support of the application by addressing the applicable approval criteria.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group here on behalf of the applicant in this case. Here with me tonight are Mr. Jim Canfield and John Anatola. I practiced that name all week, and I screwed up his first name, not his last name. Unbelievable. With Withers and Ravenel, they're the engineers and land planners for this project, and also Mr. Lyle Overcash, who is a traffic engineer who will provide testimony related to traffic impacts associated with this development. As Kevin mentioned, this is a proposal for 106 townhomes on roughly 33 acres. And as Kevin mentioned, this is a site that you all have seen before. I didn't have the luxury, if that's what you want to call it, of being a part of the prior application associated with this case. But in my review of the prior case, compared to where the case stands now, there have been modifications that we believe make this a case that everyone can support. Densities have been reduced by roughly 10 units from 116 to 106 units. Units have been pulled off of McCrimmon Parkway to avoid conflicts with future McCrimmon Parkway. The emergency access improvements have been made in consultation with each of fire and police, and heck, even ownership has changed to a certain extent with respect to the site. So there have been a number of changes throughout this process over the last couple of years since you all last saw it. In a moment, I'm going to hand it over to my witnesses, and they can discuss in detail the nuances of the plan and why we believe this plan satisfies the ordinance requirements for approval along with the modification that we've mentioned. Before I do, I want to talk a little bit about the plan and the site. And I'll just acknowledge it's a tough case, and we understand that it's a tough case. You know, I do enough land use work in the town, and I see enough tough cases come along, and some tough cases are tough because what was expected to go on the property isn't necessarily what the town is getting. And those are cases where it just doesn't 100% mix with what was the overall plan for development. And so the expectations of the community, or maybe the council, or maybe the owner, are different than what the town expects for a piece of property. That's not one of those cases. This is not one of those cases. Some cases are tough because they're infill sites, and you're putting new development next to a lot of existing homes, and what you're doing in those cases is trying to balance the impacts of a particular development with a particular community, essentially trying to acknowledge that property is going to develop, and how do you balance the interest of future owners and existing owners. This isn't one of those cases. We don't have, I anticipate there will be some folks from the community talk about it, but we don't have a throng of people that we've heard from who are concerned about the impact of this development on their communities. In contrast, this development provides exactly what has been planned for this property since 2006. It's townhome development on the portion of the property that's high and dry, and I'll get into that in a minute, and you'll hear testimony associated with that. From a density standpoint, it's lower than what the master plan called for in 2006. I believe it was 149 or 144 townhomes that were approved, and this is 104. So this isn't a situation where the modifications that are associated with the plan are because the developer's trying to squeeze 10 pounds of development into a 5-pound bag. That's not this case. The case before you tonight is tough because it's a tough piece of land. And the reason why it's a tough piece of land is because Mother Earth made it pretty tough to develop. You've got, as Kevin mentioned, and I'll see if I can bring this guy to life, you have the primary access, the exclusive access for the time being into the site at River Pine Drive extension here. And this area that you see shaded in green or highlighted in green is basically the developable portion of the site. What you see around it, this is not a byproduct of a developer who is being magnanimous about providing for appropriate buffers, not to take anything away from my client, but these are natural buffers. They are creeks that essentially encircle this site and create God-given and God-created natural buffering around the site. And as you will hear from our experts in this case, there's actually multiple buffered creeks along this portion of the site. So in addition to it kind of being encircled all the way around, there's this portion of the site is riddled with creeks and riparian buffers and things that on the master plan in 2006 were shown as open space and are retained as open space because they're just not land you want to develop for anything, quite frankly. And then finally, the environmental features associated with the site are exacerbated by CSX Railroad. It's a significant feature of this site is that its western boundary is the rail line. And that creates challenges for a variety of reasons. You're locating homes next to the railroad, which is often a concern for the community. In addition, because of things like connectivity, the ordinance would say we need to have connections to the railroad, and obviously you're not having connections to the railroad, you're having connections around the railroad. So, you know, this is a tough case. We understand it's a tough case. We understand it's a tough case for the council to review, but I think as you hear the testimony from our experts and our witnesses, and you recognize that the site is what it is, that the portion of the property that's being improved is the portion that's high and dry. It's the portion that's not in the creeks. And you'll notice we don't have requests for waiver to put things like stormwater impoundments in the buffered areas. I mean, our requests for waivers are built around the fact that when you take an ordinance that assumes every piece is flat and square and apply it to a piece of property that's anything but flat or square, you run into the situation that we're in today. And that, in my opinion, is why the ordinance allows and contemplates this process that we're in tonight, is to acknowledge that there are times when the ordinance is as written and the policies developed by the town, which make sense 99% of the time in the rest of the town, those are policies you need to take a second look at and make sure, does it make sense to provide for a vehicular connection coming west off of the site and heading north and essentially crossing and impacting 2 riparian buffers for what we believe would be an extremely limited benefit to the town. I will allow our experts to talk in more detail about the associated modifications, but we believe strongly, and we hope you all will agree, that this is a case that makes sense. At the end of the day, taking into account the hand that everybody is dealt associated with its plan for townhomes. This is a lower density than what is approved by the master plan. We're developing the high and dry pieces. We're staying out of the environmentally sensitive pieces. We believe, and again, we hope you all will agree, that this is a plan that makes sense for this piece of property. With that, I will close for the time being and hand it off to our first witness, Mr. Jim Canfield. Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you, Jason. Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Jim Canfield. I'm president of Withers and Ravenel here in Cary at 115 McKeenan Drive. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering from NC State University. I'm also a licensed professional engineer in the state of North Carolina and have been since 1990. I've worked for Withers and Ravenel for the past 25 years, with most of my work being done within the land development area and a great majority of it within the town of Cary. I was a project manager for numerous developments that created well over 1,000 lots within the town of Cary. Some of these developments included Preston Village, Cary Park, and numerous other developments. I'd like to give a brief overview now of the history of Phillips Place. The Phillips Place PDD was originally improved in 2006, and it contemplated a mix of single-family and townhome uses. The plan allowed for 285 total units, 143 being single-family, and 142 being townhome units. I'll now go kind of to the slide. This is the first phase 1A and 1B of Phillips Place, located off of what's Lewis Stevens Road now. They were approved in 2009 with 32 and 59 lots respectively for the 91 total that Kevin had in his presentation. The support and infrastructure was completed, and the lots actually recorded in 2011 and 2012. Public improvements included utilities and roadways, as well as some improvements to Old Maynard Road, which is now Stevens Road, not only across the project frontage, but also some paving of gravel sections on both sides of the property. The proposed plan for the development fits exactly with what was intended for this all along. The overall development density is consistent, although much lower than originally approved. The townhomes also provide the type of product mix that was planned for this area. As Jason discussed, and probably the most important thing to recognize, is the unique location and the characteristics of this property. And I'll go into a little more detail with what Jason said. We have a 200-foot urban transition buffer that runs all along this east side of the property. It continues along the north side, actually runs through here as well on the west side. We also have the railroad corridor that runs along the entire western boundary, as well as the McCrimmon Parkway corridor to the south. Again, it's an island out there created by all these natural features and the railroad and McCrimmon Parkway. The proposed plan for the development before you again consists of 106 townhomes to be located on 33 acres. As noted in the staff report, this represents a reduction of 10 townhomes from the previous plan that you reviewed, but probably more importantly is 36 units less than what's allowed by the PDD. As Jason indicated, the plan includes a few requests for minor modifications. I'd like to address two of these at this time. First is a fee in lieu request for an actual connection, the connection to McCrimmon Parkway. As Jason mentioned, the proposed plan includes, the vehicular connection to McCrimmon Parkway is problematic for several reasons. As the council is aware, the current thinking is that the railroad is not going to permit an at-grade crossing for future McCrimmon Parkway. As a result, the cost of making this connection is significantly more than any single similar project can offset, especially a project including a meager 106 townhomes. As shown in the staff report, the anticipated cost of making this grade separated is north of $1.4 million for this approximate 475 linear feet of roadway. For development of this size, you can readily understand that you cannot spread $1.4 million of infrastructure cost over 106 lots, especially to facilitate a vehicular connection that I believe is not necessary for the health, safety, and welfare of the town as well as the future residents. We have consulted with fire and police on multiple occasions, and we have received assurance that our plan works for them. The proposed plan includes an offer to pay a fee in lieu of approximately $285,000 for these improvements. The fee is based upon the assumption that the connection would be made at grade, which again, we recognize is not likely. However, we strongly believe that the $285,000 fee in lieu is much more reasonable and is actually what would be expected if the project was not bordered by a railroad requiring a grade separated crossing. For the council's edification, I'd like to provide a little bit of additional information related to the topography in this area. As seen on the slide in front of you is kind of a cross-section of the road. What you're looking at is the proposed, this is McCrimmon Parkway for a grade separated scenario. This cross-section is shown at this point here, which was at Lofty Ridge Drive coming in. Right now, as you can see, our design conforms with the existing topo really in this area and comes in at this point, and it's approximately, I think, 20 to 25 feet below what McCrimmon is at this point. When you get to the center line of the road, the fill required is about 30 feet, and then when you get over here to the toe of the slope, you're actually looking at excess of 43 feet of fill to actually get the road up and over McCrimmon. Also, this connection would cross, and it's a little difficult to see, but you have the urban transition buffer and the permitted or regulated stream is in this area, and there's another one in here from where the plan view is. So there's also 2 crossings that would be required. In summary, we believe the $1.4 million price tag for a future road stuff from the property is exorbitant. We believe the fee in lieu for this property of $285,000 is more than reasonable under the circumstances. Also, given the uncertainty of how McCrimmon Parkway Extension crossing will occur, and again, more importantly, is what we believe would be expected if the railroad was not there. Next, I'll move on to the vehicular connection to the north. Can you advance for me, please? Thank you. This shows the vehicular connection corridor to the north that was identified in our plans. This is the townhomes, as you saw on the overall, and where a street could be extended through. We showed the corridor coming through. Again, what was shown is open space within the PDD. The match line's kind of here and here, and it extends up to where the property line is, and Mahal Drive comes through, as Kevin indicated, somewhere north of the project. The purpose of this is to really show you the difficulties that Jason had identified in actually constructing something through this area. What you see coming down here below the blue line is the actual existing ground profile of the center line of that corridor. Then it comes up in the red. So the blues fill and the reds cut, and it comes on until the end of our property, which is approximately right in here. So there's a significant amount of fill in these 2 areas and cut, and probably more important than the amount of fill is, we have a 200-foot urban transition buffer in this area that we're crossing, with significant fill. Then there's another 100-foot urban transition buffer in this area that we're crossing, not with as much fill, but still quite a bit of fill. Both of these are regulated streams by the Corps of Engineers and Diener. So we believe there are, quite a bit of difficulties associated with anything constructed in this area. I think one thing to note of interest is that actually just less than half of the area that would be denuded for the construction of the road as shown would actually be within the urban transition buffer areas. So we'd be taking out probably, half of the land that would be cleared for that is actually included within the urban transition buffer areas. We understand that Assistant Town Manager Tim Bailey is comfortable with our proposal to dedicate the right-of-way and the easements for this corridor based on several meetings, given the site topography described and the fact that the site enjoys easy access to Lewis Stevens Road. I do not believe that this road should ever be built. The Phillips Place townhomes have easy access to Lewis Stevens, which will in turn provide them easy access to Mahal Drive in the future, and then also to 55. As the plan reflects, we are dedicating the right-of-way and easements necessary to do so, but this road would not significantly add to the plan for road improvements in this area and would really only be a benefit to the 106 townhomes that are part of the plan. Additionally, as the town is aware, because this road will not connect to another street at this time, we do not believe that NC Diener or the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will approve the crossings at this time, if ever. Even if they would, we do not believe that this connection will ever be warranted in light of the significant environmental impacts required for the connection and the limited benefit to the community of having this connection. At this time, I'll turn the presentation over to my colleague, John Anatola, who will provide additional testimony related to the minor modification and the plan's compliance with the site plan standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, and good evening. As Jim stated, my name is John Anatola. I'm a professional engineer since 2006. I work at Withers and Ravenel. I'm project manager over there in the land development section, and I am the engineer that prepared the plans that are before the council tonight. I graduated from North Carolina State University in 2000 with my BS in environmental engineering, and also graduated in 2002 with my Master's of Science. I've worked on numerous single-family and townhome residential projects for approximately the last 8 years in different municipalities. To start with tonight, I would like to provide a summary of the subdivision that is basically shown on the screen here that is before you. As Jim indicated, this plan seeks to develop 33 acres of land in the town for a total of 106 townhome units. The subdivision in the site plan proposes to extend River Pine Drive, which ends right over here, from the existing Phillips Place subdivision to serve the new townhome community. The internal streets for the new development will be private, constructed to town standards with sidewalk provided along one side of the street. There also will be visitor parking provided, which will be provided in this location up here and along this street and here. An additional parking lot for visitor parking will also be provided in this location here with a centralized mail kiosk next to the community gathering space. We have worked with the fire and the police and have included a plan that will include a 20-foot wide paved emergency access road which extends approximately which is approximately 1,750 linear feet from the end of Pilot Hill Drive and extends to Good Hope Church Road. And that is shown right in this area right in here. That is where it ends right now, Pilot Hill, and then comes down here to Good Hope Church Road. To prevent regular access, as Jim stated, or as Kevin stated and also Jason had stated before, that there will be a siren-activated gate that will be provided at the northern end of Pilot Hill Drive in this location right around in here, just off of the property. And in all, police and fire have reviewed our plan that we have presented with our construction plans and are comfortable with it, including the emergency access that we have proposed now to be a 20-foot paved roadway. The Phillips Place PDD establishes the required buffers around the site and also the streetscapes for this project that are shown on the plans before the council. In summary, the northern and eastern property lines, as Jim had stated before and also Kevin, in this area here, those are urban transition buffers, which encompass the site right around in here, and the PDD did not contemplate any perimeter buffers in this location due to the fact that those urban transition buffers were there. Likewise, the northern portion of the property up in here is identified as open space up in this northwestern portion over here, and it was dedicated as that in the PDD, and this also does not require any buffers from the adjacent CSX railroad, which is located over here. There will be a 50-foot type A railroad buffer and a 50-foot type A streetscape provided in the southwestern portion of the site, buffering the townhomes from the CSX railroad corridor and the future McCrimmon Parkway. Those will be located in this area here, as well as in this located here.
In addition to the perimeter buffers, a landscaping plan for the townhome development has been designed and provided in accordance with town ordinance and standards. There also will be sanitary sewer lines, water lines, and reclaimed water lines installed within this development, and they are also being stubbed to adjacent properties. One stub for the sanitary sewer line will be in this area here, which will include an aerial sewer crossing due to the topography, as Jim had stated, in this area. The other one will be in this area right down here, and that will not be an aerial sewer crossing, but will be stubbed to that property line for future use. Storm drainage systems will also be installed that will direct stormwater runoff towards the wet pond BMP that is located in northern end right down in this area here, and that will be treated and attenuated to meet the town standards. The front facades and the side facades of all proposed townhomes will meet or exceed the requirement for providing a minimum of 35% high-quality masonry requirements. Rear facades that are reasonably expected to be visible to the public will also meet or exceed this requirement. At this time, I would like to focus on the plan's compliance with the requirements for approval, including the request for minor modifications. I will first start with some of the minor modifications. As you heard from Jim, pursuant to LDO Section 8.1.5A2, the applicant is requesting a fee in lieu for construction of the future portion of McCrimmon Parkway, which is down here, that borders the southern portion of the site. To avoid repetition, I heard Jim's testimony on this point, and I agree that the proposed fee in lieu is very reasonable. Also, as you heard from Jim, the plan seeks a modification to the development standards of Section 7.10.3B of the LDO as they relate to the requirement that a road be stubbed to the northern property. Again, that is in this area here. That is in this area right in here. And I agree with Jim's testimony on this point. As a result of the environmental impacts that are necessary to facilitate this road, along with the limited benefit that the Phillips Place community would receive from this connection, I believe that pursuant to the standards of the Section 319 of the LDO, this modification advances the purposes and goals of the LDO, avoids unnecessary impact to environmentally sensitive areas, and relieves a practical difficulty of developing the property. Next, I would like to discuss the requested modification involved with the connectivity to the western property line. This plan includes a request for a modification to the requirements of Section 710.3B of the LDO to allow the plan to proceed without providing a vehicular or pedestrian connection to the western property boundary, which is also bound by the CSX Railroad. I believe this waiver is justified because it furthers the purposes and goals of the LDO and relieves the practical difficulty of developing the site. The subject's entire western property boundary, as stated before, is bordered by the CSX Railroad. In addition to the town's comprehensive transportation plan, a collector road crossing the rail is located just north of the property in this area up in here. And also there is one associated with the future McCrimmon Parkway in this area right down in here. This crossing would be the third crossing of the railroad within a distance of approximately 1,700 linear feet. Further, a grade-separated crossing, which we believe would be required, would result in a significant economic hardship due to the requirements involved in a grade-separated crossing of the railroad and the existing topography along the western portion. Eliminating this crossing would also avoid impacting additional perimeter buffers and/or open space, and also urban transition buffers along the railroad right-of-way. I believe, therefore, the goals and the purposes of this ordinance are met with grant of this minor modification as it is permitted by Section 319 of the LDO and relieves a practical difficulty to developing the site. Next, I would like to discuss the requested modification involving the LDO requirement to provide a second point of access for plans proposing more than 100 units. This plan seeks to permit the development of more than 100 units with only one point of access for the townhome development. The underlying purpose of the LDO is to ensure that there is adequate access to the site for emergency response vehicles. First, there is a public street connection for the development from River Pine Drive, which connects to Lewis Stevens Road, as shown on this plan right here. In this location here is Lewis Stevens Drive, has been talked about earlier, and goes all the way down to the townhome development. Additionally, development plans to provide a secondary paved emergency access to the overall site, which is currently not provided. That will be again in this location down in here. In consultation with the town's fire and police chiefs and the memo that has been provided with the site plan itself, the plan proposes a 20-foot paved emergency access road within a 30-foot easement which extends approximately 1,750 linear feet from the end of Pilot Hill Drive to Good Hope Church Road. This improves the existing gravel access that is currently provided. As noted on the plans, an access gate with a siren-operated sensor will be installed at the southernmost portion of Pilot Hill Drive to restrict non-emergency vehicles from using this route. The existing 20-foot gravel cell tower access, which sits in this 30-foot easement, will be paved in accordance with the Town of Cary fire lane standards to support emergency vehicles and otherwise improved as a secondary emergency access. In addition, due to the nature of the surrounding properties, which are undeveloped, the lack constructed public streets for access around the site, and the environmental features that are currently existing with stream buffers and UTBs, surrounding the townhome portion of the Phillips Place PDD, there is a practical difficulty in locating alternative accesses to the site at this time. As proposed, I believe the goals and purposes of the ordinance are met with grant of this minor modification as permitted by the LDO. At this point, I would like to move on to address the site plan standards of the LDO. The first approval criteria is, does the plan comply with all applicable requirements of the LDO, including the development and design standards of Chapter 7 and 8, as well as the dedication and improvement provisions of Chapter 8, as well as all applicable town specifications? With the approval of the minor modifications, this requirement will be satisfied. As indicated on the proposed plan and in other materials submitted, the improvements have been designed in compliance with the requirements of the town's land development ordinance, including the development and design standards of Chapter 7 and 8, as well as the dedication and improvements of Chapter 8. The plan contains parking that satisfied code requirements for the same. Additionally, sidewalks, streets, a public gathering space, and other infrastructure have been designed in compliance with town standards for the same. The second approval criteria, does the plan adequately protect other property or residential uses located on the same property from the potential adverse effects of the proposed development? I believe that it does. The proposed development is for an integrated residential community per the Phillips Place PDD. In accordance with the Phillips Place PDD, this project proposes to place townhomes within an area that has designated for townhome use. This proposed use is also in harmony with the latest Town of Cary Northwest Area Plan, which calls for medium-density residential use. The proposed plan incorporates the code-required building setbacks as shown on the Phillips Place PDD and on the plans, thus ensuring that the townhome units are located in such a manner as to minimize any potential adverse effect on the residential uses located adjacent to or on the same property. The community will also include landscaping as required by the land development ordinance and also features a number of urban transition buffers. And again, we've stated all that previously, that all those are located around the site, the urban transition buffers, and then a 50-foot Type A streetscape, as well as a 50-foot Type A railroad buffer will be installed in this area down here. These proposed buffers are to remain undisturbed except as required to construct streets, utilities, or other infrastructure. The Phillips Place PDD has a requirement that if any of these buffers are disturbed, revegetated, they will be revegetated according to the Town of Cary buffer requirements. As a lower density townhome community in an area planned and or built for other comparable residential uses, the proposed use has no inherent qualities that would adversely impact adjacent properties. Therefore, I believe that the proposed plan adequately protects other property and residential uses on the subject property from the potential adverse effects of the proposed development. The third criteria, does the plan provide harmony and unity with the development of nearby properties? In accordance with the Phillips Place PDD, this project proposes to place townhomes within an area that are designated for the townhome use per the PDD. This proposed use is also in harmony with the latest Town of Cary Northwest Area Plan. This is an area that is planned for similar residential development. As a result, I believe that the proposed lower density townhome community will be in harmony with the development of nearby properties. The fourth criteria, does the plan provide safe conditions for pedestrians or motorists and prevents a dangerous arrangement of pedestrians and vehicular ways? This plan includes sufficient number of sidewalks which are proposed in accordance with Town of Cary standards to be located on one side of each street to ensure that no conflicts between vehicles and pedestrians occur. And the street network has been designed in a manner that will result in vehicle speeds that are conducive to a townhome community. The plans call for the posted speed limit to be 25 miles per hour. The plan also incorporates a centralized mail kiosk, which is located, again, I'll go back to, which is located in this area down in here, which also has sidewalks going to it. Pedestrian access has also been provided around the centralized mail kiosk, which will help to eliminate any potential conflicts between pedestrians and vehicular traffic. This portion is also connected to the adjacent single-family residential portion of the Phillips Place townhomes in this location there. As a result, I believe that this requirement has been satisfied. The fifth approval criteria, does the plan provide safe ingress and egress for emergency vehicles to the site? I believe that it does. There is access to the Phillips Place subdivision from Lewis Stevens Road, as we discussed earlier and has been discussed off of here. And with the inclusion of the approximately 1,750 linear foot, 20-foot wide paved emergency access, which we have consulted with police and the fire as being acceptable, there is a second adequate safe egress and ingress for the emergency services to the overall site. In conclusion, it is my professional opinion that the Phillips Place subdivision and site plan meets the criteria as set forth in the Cary Land Development Ordinance for approval of criteria 1 through 5. Now, I will turn the presentation over to my colleague, Mr. Lyle Overcash, PE, who will further address the fifth approval criteria and fully address the sixth approval criteria as it relates to traffic. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks, John. My name is Lyle Overcash. I'm Managing Director of the VHB Raleigh office at 4000 West Chase Boulevard in Raleigh. I've been employed at VHB for about 14 years, and I've been a traffic engineer for over 20 years. Hold a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering also from NC State back in 1993. I'm a licensed PE in North Carolina and a member of Institute of Transportation Engineers. Since 2004, we've been contracted to do traffic studies for the town of Cary as part of our on-call contract with the town. And during that period, I've directed over 80 studies across the town, including this one back in 2006 as part of TAR 210. So here I am 10 years later almost, taking a look at it again. Regarding the fifth approval criteria, does the site plan provide safe ingress and egress for emergency services to the site? From a purely traffic standpoint, there are approximately 30% less vehicles over the course of the day for a 106 townhome development than there would be for 100 single-family detached homes. So strictly from a trip generation standpoint, the traffic generated from this development is less than what could be generated for a plan that complies with the ordinance requirements for vehicular connections. Regarding the sixth approval criteria, does the plan provide mitigation for traffic congestion impacts reasonably expected to be generated by the project? We have updated the TIA for this property and have provided this update to the applicant as well as the town. River Pine Drive, under existing and future conditions, operates at level service A. Further, as noted in the staff report, the only additional recommended improvement to this proposed plan is that upon build out, the developer should conduct a signal wire analysis and, if warranted, install a wood pole signal at Lewis Stevens Drive and McCrimmon Parkway. This improvement is to address an existing deficiency along westbound McCrimmon Parkway. As I understand it, the developer has agreed to this condition. As a result, it is my opinion that the plan provides mitigation for the traffic congestion impacts reasonably to be expected by the project. I'm available to answer your questions if you have any. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that is our last witness to call. As part of our case in chief, at this point, I'd like to submit into evidence all of the exhibits that have been included in your presentation, including those provided by the applicant as well as part of the staff's report, and would ask that the council take judicial notice of the contents of the town's land development ordinance and the other adopted plans that the town has. As I said at the beginning, I do feel and I hope you all agree that where there are deviations associated with this plan, they are deviations that are created by the significant environmental features that circle this property, or deviations that are created by the fact that the railroad's a neighbor. If this were flat and the railroad wasn't there, we wouldn't have these minor modifications. It's a tough site to lay the ordinance down on top of and get it to make sense. And that's ultimately what we have tried to do. And we believe that the plan that is before you all makes sense. We believe it is reasonable. It equitably balances the interests of the environment, of the community, of the town, and of the developer. As you've heard, the financial commitments that have been made as part of this case are not insignificant. Do they meet the town's standards for what those financial commitments would otherwise be? No. We readily admit that. We don't have the ability to satisfy that. And I'd venture to guess that any other developer who wanted to do townhome style densities on this site would face a similar challenge of trying to foot the bill for instance, a $1.4 million McCrimmon Parkway improvement at this site. So again, we believe the plan makes sense. We believe it's reasonable. Is it perfect for my client? No. Is it perfect for the town? No. We recognize that. What we have tried to do and what we believe we have achieved is balancing the interests of everybody associated with the process. Finally, my client has been a part of this development for a long time, has been a part of this particular site now for about 5 years. And again, you've seen it before, roughly 2 years ago, and we're back again. And this is their best foot forward, for lack of a better way to put it. We have squeezed everything we can possibly squeeze out of this process and have made every tweak that we can come up with in order to make it a site that you all will be comfortable, will be an asset to the town, and will provide the type of community the town could be proud of. With that, we are here to answer any questions you might have and respectfully request you all find that the evidence that has been submitted satisfies the ordinance requirements for approval and grant approval of the same. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'll invite other speakers who have been sworn in who wish to speak in support of the application to approach the podium one at a time. Seeing no one, I'll invite cross-examination of the witness who testified in support of the request. Nope. We'll now open the hearing for those who are opposed to the request. Please approach the podium one at a time. Those who are opposed. Seeing no one, I'll call on town staff for any testimony they wish to add.
Thank you again. And as most of the minor modifications or modifications deal with transportation issues, I will call Mr. Jerry Jensen of the Transportation and Facilities Department to talk about the beginning modifications.
Good evening, Council. Tonight we'd like to talk a little bit about some staff observations regarding the minor modifications that are being requested by the applicant tonight. I myself would like to deal with the payment in lieu modification as well as some of the connectivity issues that have been discussed tonight. As shown on our comprehensive transportation plan, McCrimmon Parkway is a major thoroughfare from Highway 55 over Lewis Stevens Road. A crossing of the CSX rail line is most likely going to need to be a grade separated structure, and an at-grade crossing probably just not going to be permitted by CSX. The request tonight by the applicant is to make a payment in lieu payment for construction of McCrimmon Parkway along their frontage on the basis that the crossing of McCrimmon Parkway at CSX will be at an at-grade crossing. So there is a difference in cost between what a grade separated crossing would cost versus an at-grade crossing. I just want to make you aware of that. Secondly, the town hasn't conducted any advanced planning studies for the alignment both vertically and horizontally for McCrimmon Parkway other than what you see on our comprehensive transportation plan. So there may be some variability as we go through the planning stages of planning this road in the future. However, we do believe that a payment in lieu does appear to be a practical approach for this particular development, and it basically advances the goals of our transportation plan. And even though we may not need the improvement today, it certainly is going to be needed in the future. Regarding the partial payment in lieu amount that is being offered by the applicant, staff offers some level of support based on three main ideas. First, the size and intensity of the proposed development project provides a balanced approach and commitment toward meeting the town's transportation expectations. Secondly, the project will be paying transportation development fees as they develop this site, which can be applied to future thoroughfare projects, including the construction of McCrimmon Parkway. And lastly, a development project adjacent to a railroad and the need for a grade separation is a very unusual circumstance that we just don't see very often, is rarely encountered as other land development projects have occurred in Cary. In regards to connectivity, just wanted to point out in the area, we do have 2 east-west connecting roads in the immediate vicinity. One is McCrimmon Parkway, and the other is a collector street. Both run from NC Highway 55 over to Lewis Stevens Drive. Both streets are most likely also going to be required to have a grade separated structure with the CSX line. Regarding the connectivity to north, which we've discussed a little bit tonight, the applicant is volunteering to provide the necessary rights-of-way and easements for the future construction of this road if it's needed in the future. The right-of-way will actually preserve the opportunities to have a connecting street in the future if we so desire and is needed. As testimony tonight earlier by Mr. Canfield, he did talk about this northern stub road would have some environmental impacts and features that must be dealt with as they contemplate construction of this road. We'll point out to council there are 2 stream buffer crossings here. And as Mr. Canfield had testified earlier, and we have some concurrence that getting some level of acceptance by the Corps of Engineers to permit a crossing at this point in time is probably not feasible until the Corps has some level of comfort that this road can connect to another road and the road would go somewhere. Given that there is no likelihood of going anywhere anytime soon, it's probably not permissible crossing at this point in time, but it's not to say that it can't occur in the future. Also wanted to point out again that as Mr. Canfield described, there is a significant amount of grading that is going to be needed, particularly to cross these stream buffers, as shown and identified by the red contour lines that they have drawn on their plan. This is also a piece of testimony that Mr. Canfield gave earlier tonight. This shows the limits of cut and fill slopes along that corridor. Those cut and fill slopes range anywhere from 20 to 25 feet, which basically translate into extending outside of the right-of-way anywhere from 40 to 50 feet. Lastly, I want to point out that we have talked a lot about Mahal Drive, the east-west collector street that would have to cross the CSX rail line. That's obviously got to be, most likely be a grade separated structure, and that probably is going to be somewhere between 18 and 20 feet above the natural track grade. As shown on this particular slide where I have my pointer, that's at the top of that 18 feet is where I've got my pointer. I did have my pointer. That is about where the grade of Mahal Drive would come in as it approaches this stub local street. So the likelihood of being able to even bring that road up to a level to meet Mahal Drive is probably unlikely. Now there is an opportunity that if we wish to continue that local road to neighboring properties to the north, that certainly is an opportunity, but it probably would have to be some level of a grade separated structure for that local street going underneath Mahal Drive. I want to talk a little bit, I think we also have talked a little bit tonight about the connection to McCrimmon Parkway. I think the takeaway from this was just that their grading plan that they've developed for this site assumes that McCrimmon Parkway is going to have an at-grade crossing with CSX line, but we've already discussed at great length tonight that probably is unlikely. And so the opportunity to connect to that road is probably non-existent. This graphic, again, is some testimony that was provided by Mr. Canfield, shows the vertical separation between McCrimmon Parkway and where the road currently is being planned right now of about 21 feet. In order to plan for the likelihood of making some sort of connection to McCrimmon would mean almost they need to raise the whole site up 20 feet just to make grade with that. So if you can envision that on a site plan, that's probably going to require an extensive amount of additional grading to do that type of work. It's not to say that this road in the future could not be extended further south, similar to Mahal Drive, with some other type of grade separated structure and continue to the south. But again, they have preserve that opportunity to do that as well. Let's see. And then lastly, there has been a request for a modification to the Stubman Street to the west from CSX Railroad. Again, staff feels comfortable that McCrimmon Parkway and the collector street that run east-west provides enough connectivity in that area that we don't need to cross the CSX rail line at additional time in that area. And that concludes my observations, and Mr. Hales will be provide some additional observation about the final modification that they're requesting. Thank you.
I'll just briefly go over the final modification, which is the more than 100 units off a single point of access. And again, as it was in their previous iteration of the plan in 2013, it is a multi-tiered request. But looking at the existing, there's 91 units in the detached residential portion of Phyllis Place, all served off Lewis Stevens Drive. There's no other access to the development at this time. Applicants proposing to add additional 106 townhomes off a single point of access on the extension of River Pine Drive. That just exacerbates the existing access issue on Lewis Stevens Drive. To mitigate some of that concern, the applicant has proposed the previously discussed asphalt emergency access, which will be gated, so it's only used during emergency access, which is a condition of their access easement, which does mitigate some of the larger concerns, however, still leaves the 106 townhomes with a single point of access. As Mr. Jensen just discussed, connections to both the north and the south, both are very expensive, more than likely if they occur, going to be grade separated structures. Our best guess at this point is if they don't get made now, they probably won't in the future due to the environmental concerns and the cost of making those connections. So looking at this modification, it will probably be a long-term, if not permanent modification to keep 106 townhomes off that single point of access. McCrimmon Parkway will come back down to grade, and the connection of Pilot Hill Drive and extension of Pilot Hill Drive south, once the properties to the south do develop, will provide long-term relief for the larger concern. As mentioned by the applicant, there have been extensive conversations with the emergency service providing departments, police and fire, and the proposed access road, now that it is paved and then the siren actuated gate, while it is not an ideal situation and not providing true access to a second public street, is a much better condition than previously proposed and better than nothing. So that concludes staff's observations this time. Here's a summary of the modifications. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to go over anything. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll invite cross-examination. Nope. We now ask anyone who has been sworn in if they have any objections to the competency of any evidence presented. Nope. Does either party believe that evidence presented warrants a continuance of this hearing? Nope. We now begin the deliberative phase of the hearing. Council members, questions or comments?
I'll open up, I'll start. Can you go back to the map for a little bit?
You want just the, you want the overall?
Just that overall site. So I'm hearing repeatedly that it looks like the grades are going to be difficult because of the grade separated crossing with CSX, these connectors to the north and to the south from Mahal and McCrimmon. So talk to me a little bit about why this connection is right here and why it does not drag eastbound and try to connect to McCrimmon further east so that the grade is at a more reasonable place.
I'll give you a brief answer and I'll defer to the applicant if they want to fill in any more. But if you remember, there's a large stream buffer that runs along this property line, divides the phase, the single family phase from the other. Permitting is going to want to cross that perpendicular. There's really not a lot of space to move it too far to the east. And if you want to add anything to that, feel free, Jim.
Thank you, Kevin. Looking at it, the transition buffers and the grades associated with it, there's still a significant amount of fill with McCrimmon. It starts right in here and comes all the way back. This is all, again, urban transition buffer area, 200 feet of it. And we have some of the same similar constraints we have elsewhere. So, again, this is just a difficult piece, and we have looked at a lot of different things with staff.
Okay, and what about up to the north? I mean, you're taking that connection of River Pine Drive and you're kind of pulling it north to the west of the community, but you have that little blue B&P up there. I think that's a B&P.
Yes, it is.
Why wouldn't you just relocate that B&P and take the road up north to Mahal that way?
Again, topography and urban transition buffers. We've got a 200-foot buffer there, and that BMP actually sits probably 25 to 30 feet below the site. It goes way down. So again, it's all dealing with the site topo.
But there you'd only have to cross one place, right? The other one would have to be crossing at two.
That's correct.
How seriously did you explore those opportunities?
We've looked at just about everything. Trust me, we've been working on this thing for 2.5 years, and we have examined a multitude of different alternatives and different stub locations. And what we feel, we have in front of you is really what we've ended up with after that long analysis.
Other questions, comments?
I remember this one mainly because of the gravel road, which I kind of didn't really like. So I don't know if I asked the question back then, but if I did, I can't remember the answer to it, so I want to ask it again. That 20-foot paved roadway, is that a permanent roadway easement? I mean, is that something that could one day become a permanent road, or is this just some fire road that once the land to the south gets developed, that road might go away?
If you actually look at the comprehensive transportation plan, there's a proposed collector street that runs roughly that alignment. It intersects on the plan because it's a conceptual alignment a little bit farther to the east. But I would anticipate that once that property redevelops in the future, and it's very large residential, so at some point it will, the Pilot Hill Drive will extend down, that easement will go away, and then access to the cell tower will be through the subdivision. But that's supposition.
And Mr. Barron could speak to the terms of their easement. From what I've seen, if McCrimmon is built and comes across and intersects with that River Pine? Pilot Hill Drive, then their right to the easement extinguishes. So there's no right that the town would ever have in that easement area other than the rights that they've been granted from the landowner to have their emergency access road, but we would have no claim to ever building a road in that spot.
So the road could be permanent?
No.
Well, one could not be permanent.
No, I mean, it's an easement for emergency access purposes only, and once McCrimmon is built across and connects at that point, then the easement extinguishes and goes away by the terms of the easement.
And that's correct. Now, from our perspective, once McCrimmon ties in, we have the second access that we need to support our development.
Okay.
And that, as Kevin alluded to, the town standards are when that property comes along, there is an improvement shown on the transportation plan that contemplates a road generally in this location where the emergency access is currently being provided.
Okay, so at the end of the day, you do have a second access for emergency services, which we hope you'd never need. But when McCrimmon comes through, you will definitely have a second access.
Correct.
Okay.
Wait. When McCrimmon comes through, we may not definitely have an access.
Yeah, because it'll connect to the north side of Pine Hill Drive.
You'll have a second access to the overall
But it may
PDD.
not connect in the subdivision.
In the townhomes, correct.
Okay. Those are my two questions.
Yeah, and I can't get, I really appreciate the difficulties, I really do, but I can, in my right mind, approve a single access for basically a 200-unit cul-de-sac, and that's what I'm being asked to do. And I don't think it's safe, I don't think it's smart, I don't think it's good planning, and I'm not going to support it. Mr. Earl?
Well, I think the applicant really has done all they can possibly do with this site, and I appreciate that. And Mr. Barron kept saying it makes sense, and a lot of these things do make sense. It certainly makes sense not to connect to the north the way we would do it. It just, typographical, environmental reasons, I don't know if I could ever approve a road going through there under any circumstances for any development here. And it certainly makes sense that a development this size, which is, although it sounds big, it's a small development, 106 townhomes, certainly cannot afford $1.4 million. I mean, that absolutely makes sense. And certainly, we don't need a third connection across the railroad to the west. So, I mean, all those things make sense, and certainly the emergency access is a lot better than what we saw the last time. There's no question about it. But I just can't get over the 197 units with one access, even if the emergency section is taken care of by that little connector. I just can't do that. It looks like, you know, instead of $1.4 million, we're settling for $285,000. And instead of the road to the north, we're settling for right-of-way and an easement. And instead of a real road as another connection, we're settling for this emergency access. And I think the site just requires settling, and I just don't feel like I'm ready to settle at this point for that site. I have trouble with 197 units with one access.
Mr. Smith, anything from you?
Well, trying to keep an open mind, and it was interesting listening to the concern. I guess I didn't have as strong a concern about the extra long, you know, just because the relief was put in. You know, it's a gravel road. We went through this when we saw it the first time, and you know, I think we're like between a rock and a hard spot. I mean, I think it ends up being nice, usable property in an area that is going to have a lot of solitude. I mean, you're not going to build one, you know, in that because of that buffering. And, you know, maybe the fire chief can talk a little bit about that, you know, that safety issue, but I just wasn't having that, you know, that strong a reaction that we have a safety issue. It's been mitigated. It may not be the typical kind or the prettiest kind, you know, but it's there. So, you know, to me, this was the best of what can be considered there. So those are just my thoughts, but I'm trying to keep an open mind here to everybody else's comments.
I mean, it's mitigated to the 197. My point would be the 106 has one entrance. It's at least a 106 unit cul-de-sac. Is what it equates to me, and that's what I have an issue with.
Okay.
Other comments?
My other comments would be, I mean, you know, I can sympathize with the applicant and the site and the constraints and the difficulties and such, but, you know, at the same time, I didn't make them buy it. My issue with this when it came to us last time was the gravel road, that's lack of a true second entrance, and why I may not be thrilled with a 20-foot wide asphalt road in for a second emergency access that hopefully somebody, you know, make sure it still reads the siren once in a while and a gate opens. At least technically does serve the need. You know, I can understand, I mean, I agree with much of Mr. Urha's comments regarding the road and crossing sensitive areas and such. I mean, I don't, you know, think we're ever going to build the road to the north. I do believe that once they get McCrimmon through there, you get your second access. So it's one of those halfies. I don't feel good about it. I'd probably vote for it, but I do struggle with it.
If we're ready to move into the motion phase, we can close the deliberative phase of the hearing. Looks like we are. So I'm open to council for a motion.
That's a tough one. I mean, I could not, I mean, the problem is that I could not approve it as the modification requests are written out now. For example, for B, I could not accept just the right-of-way. I'd have to have a payment in lieu to help us with building that in the future. I mean, personally, I think they ought to build it. And there are many, many neighborhoods that are built here and in other places where you have a long drive to get to the neighborhood because that's what the topography demanded. And I think they ought to pursue it. I understand what staff is saying, that they don't think they'll get the approval for the crossings at this time because there's not a road to connect to it. I think they're, I understand that they have looked and looked and looked at alternatives. I'm disappointed that the alternative they come up with crosses the stream twice and connects at a point where it could never really connect if we have Mahal Drive grade separated in the future. And we have to be planning these communities not for the next 4 years, but for the next 40 years. And I think approval of this project in general is short-sighted. And I don't want to say that because I know this group has struggled on this, but it's too many units in a really compromised site, a site that does not have the facilities accessible to make it work. And if we do this, we're shoehorning it in here. And I think this is one of those projects that if I approve it later on, I'm going to feel really bad about approving. I'm going to go over there and go like, man, why did we do that? I hate that we did this. And I don't know, I have a lot of reservation about it. So I can't make a motion for approval.
We can make a motion to deny if you don't want to make a motion to approve.
Or you can make a motion to approve some and deny others.
Yes, that's true. We're on modifications.
Make a motion that we approve minor or modification request A, request to make a payment in lieu for construction of 1/2 of McCrimmon Parkway.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
I don't want to put the town on the hook possibly for $1 million here.
The entire bridge costs $1 million, right?
$1.4 million.
So you would expect them to pay for the other half that's not on their frontage?
No, it's $1.4 million for grade separated. It would be apparently $285 for at grade. And at grade is
So
virtually
you would want to
impossible.
see them spend 700 and some thousand then?
I would not want to see them paying, if we had to do a grade separated,
Right.
which is going to cost $1.4 million.
Right.
They pay $285,000. Leaves $1.1 million left. Who pays that $1.1 million? I guess the town. And I don't want to see the town have to pay.
Well, and/or the people on the other side of the railroad, that when it develops too. I mean, it goes back to that everybody paying their fair share part.
Can you put the map back up for us?
And just a point of clarification, that 1.4 million does not include the bridge. That is for their frontage. That's independent of the bridge crossing. That's the fill and the road construction.
That's even more.
Can you
That was not clear to
put the map back up for us?
The site plan?
Site plan, yeah. So there is a stub from one of the, right here, and you can't see where my arrow is pointing, sorry. Pilot Hill Drive has 2 cul-de-sacs and 1 stub out of it. Is there a home right here? Is that what we're looking at?
That's an existing cell tower.
That's an existing sub, okay.
Correct.
So could they not have tried to pull the road, instead of connecting directly to McCrimmon, could they have not have pulled the road somehow to the east, around the cell tower, and over into that stub?
So a second crossing on the southern end of the property?
Yeah, I mean,
Defer to
they
Jim.
haven't tried that? I mean, it just seems crazy to even talk about a stub from McCrimmon when we know it's not going to be feasible to do because of the terrain. And then we're going to end up with this weird thing, you know, the street that doesn't go anywhere with a high road right next to it. And it's going to look like, you know how like they go back in and fit highways in, like in Los Angeles, and they cut off roads, and then you have this like weird, you know, discontinuous road. I mean, it just seems weird to me. Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, there's a motion on the table, so probably what you would need to do, if you want that question answered, you'd need to reopen the hearing and then close it again to come back to your deliberations.
So either we vote on the motion or the motion has to be withdrawn. We
You
open
don't
the,
really have to withdraw, but you do have to reopen the hearing.
while the motion is on the
obtain-
table.
Yeah, to obtain additional evidence, because this is getting into new evidence.
Okay, we're going to reopen the public hearing and ask Mr. Kentfield to answer the question.
Mayor, you have reached the 1-hour time limit.
Thank you.
Do we have to withdraw the motion?
No.
No. Okay.
We've reopened the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Robinson, we have looked at it. There are significant environmental features, but that does not mean we can't relook at it and see if we can get it, into a permittable location and grade and all that. So we could look at that again.
That would be my strong preference, because it sounds to me like McCrimmon is really not even a feasible connection in the future. Unless we had some kind of weird magical thing where we didn't have to go grade separated over the CSX rail line. But at this juncture, that doesn't seem feasible. So
That would not disagree.
I don't know what the right approach is, because, Jim, you're hearing from us that there's so many things that we have consternation about over this. We don't feel great about it. If I were in your shoes, I'd be saying maybe we need to be more aggressive and look at some really, really aggressive different approaches to solving this problem. If it were I'd be trying to pull that road, the connection off of McCrimmon over to that pilot stub, and then I'd be going northbound and trying to connect over to Mahal as far east as I physically could. That way you'd have 3 connections over, and then we wouldn't fault you for the fact that, that whole area is somewhat compressed. I mean, then it's on the town to get McCrimmon built. But right now, the way you're setting it up is you're setting it up for this neighborhood to indefinitely have one connection for 106 homes, and then it's exacerbated by the fact that none of those other homes adjacent have another connection for the near-term future. Does that make sense? So it just seems like this isn't quite working yet.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I think the applicants may have another suggestion for a way to approach things in the interim. Will Mr. Barron speak?
Obviously, my client's principal interest is getting a development plan approved for this site and bringing forward a plan that you all are comfortable with. If there are additional things that we should be looking at that you all believe are things that could be modifications that the council could support, we're interested in taking a look at those, certainly, as opposed to having a plan be denied tonight, and just calling it what it is. I think I'm hearing Councilor Robinson say explore alternative connections, and we will sharpen our pencils anew and see what we can do in terms of connectivity. I think I heard, Mr. Mayor, you expressed consternation with the unit count on a single point of access, and we will take a look at that as well, if there are other specific items. Now, one of the things I want to be real clear about, we can't do anything associated with the fact that there are existing units on the ground. I don't think we can take those away as part of this application, but we will look at the number that we have associated with this plan and see if we can address the concerns that we've heard. Are there other concerns that the council would like for us to sharpen our pencils on for the next time we come back? Not guaranteeing results, but we'll certainly do everything we can to address those concerns.
I don't see how you meet Mr. Yearhoff's concern. I really don't. I mean, if we're expecting the developer to cover half the cost of half of a road bridge connection,
If we were able to get a second access based on one of Mrs. Robinson's suggestions, then maybe that would not.
That goes away, then they don't have to worry about right? Do they have to worry about the frontage of McCrimmon?
I mean, they're responsible for transportation improvements along the frontage of
I
that
guess
property.
that goes adjacent to their project.
It would be they're not necessarily required to connect to McCrimmon there. They'd be looking for a connection to the south, just given the distance between Pilot Hill Drive and the property line. But it would just be another modification like the one to the north.
Right, but
It's not exacerbated by the number of.
Any developers have to make the improvements along their frontage.
Oh, correct.
Even if they don't connect, they still have to make the.
Correct. They're responsible for building McCrimmon along their frontage.
Okay.
So that concern doesn't go away.
Well, that's true, but I still think I think taking off connections that are not ever going to be feasible and coming up with better alternatives allays a lot of my concerns. I could probably accept, and maybe we need to look at that number. Maybe it's not the 2 plus change, whatever that you guys are offering. Maybe it's a little bit higher, but not the full amount or something. But having that other connection in there and not setting ourselves up for failure makes a big difference to me.
All right.
Other comments or questions for further testimony? If not, we'll close the public hearing portion yet again. And we have a motion on the table.
I'll remove my motion.
And the second was?
I'll accept that removal.
And so the motions have been removed.
How do we table a quasi-judicial?
How do we?
The biggest, one, it's the biggest, but one concern is notice, so you can continue it to a specific date, and that's acceptable. If you just table it, then you'd have to re-advertise it when it came back.
To just table it?
If you table it now, then it wouldn't necessarily have to come back by a specific date, but when it does come back, it would have to be re-advertised.
Okay.
If you continue it.
Make a motion to table.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Oh, I would second that. I think that's
Second,
reasonable.
discussion. To me, it sounds like it's going to be a significant change to the site plan and everything else. I would like it to go through the whole process.
Well, but the whole process is a staff level review and then to us, right?
Okay.
So.
So
but
what
I
would be
think-
different?
If you table it tonight, not to a specific meeting, we're going to go through the iterative process like we normally would, and when we get to a point where we've said, okay, this is as good as it's going to get, we'll bring it back to you after
You'll
we've
advertise
advertised
it.
and everything else.
And
Correct.
that's not a big deal to advertise because we're advertising other stuff too, right?
It's no different than any other hearing.
Okay.
And the advantage of continuing?
You would continue it to a specific date, and they'd have a deadline, they have to come back.
I'd rather just table it. When they're ready to come back, they come back.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to table. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, no. Motion carries 4-1. And that concludes our quasi-judicial hearings for the evening. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
That was a lackluster.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
We just want to stay together.
Did you want to continue?
I want to deny it.
No.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.